Chapter 32-36. Just as Xiao Jian said, there were many carriages and merchants waiting to be inspected by the she soldiers. They passed through the border and entered the bridge. Meanwhile, Xiao Jian spurred his horse on, not even bothering to line up. He galloped through the center of the road, heading towards the soldiers who were holding weapons and guarding the bridge. "Taoist priest, please wait." One of the soldiers walked out and raised his hand, shouting, "Please take out the official document for inspection." "Boundless holy man." Xiao Jian called out his Taoist name. He reached into his bosom and took out a square jade clip. He handed it over and said with a smile, "This is my official name. Please check it, General." "Taoist priest, please wait a moment." The soldier took the jade clip without looking at it and hurried towards the side of the bridge where several tents were located. Not long after, a strong man wearing armor with a sword hanging from his waist quickly walked over with the jade clip in his hand. He bowed and said, "This general, Li Xinyu, greets Taoist priest Xiao. I, Xiao Jian, greets General Li." Xiao Jian's face was indifferent. He raised his left hand and saluted, saying, "I brought my disciples and seniors to travel around Yu province. At this moment, we are heading towards Jianghu country. Please make an exception for us." "Taoist priest Xiao, you can naturally bring your disciples to Jianghu country. This general only needs to inspect the carriage." Li Xinyu looked at Xiao Jian, then looked at Xiao Hua and the others and said with a smile, "But you only wrote Taoist Xiao and a boy named Yuan Ya in the official document. There are still a few blanks left behind, and the remaining 2 boys, how dare you?" Xiao Jian shouted, raising his hand. He looked at Xiao Hua very respectfully and said, "This is the senior of this old man's sect. How can this old man's name be written on this old man's official document?" This general greets Immortal Master." Li Xinyu was shocked and hurriedly bowed in front of Xiao Hua. After all, for a young man to be called a senior by an old man, this young man immediately had the demeanor of an immortal master. Xiao Hua nodded and waved his hand. Li Xinyu couldn't help but stand up. Immortal elder." Li Xinyu straightened up, swallowed his saliva, and said nervously, "I know that Immortal Master is a senior expert, but do you have an official document?" "This old man doesn't have any official documents." Xiao Hua shook his head. "This old man also doesn't need any official documents." Li Xinyu gritted his teeth and said awkwardly, "The order I received is that anyone who comes from the border in front of me must either pay customs duties or have an official document." So that's how it is." Xiao Hua nodded. "This old man won't make things difficult for you, senior." Xiao Jian smiled and said, "As long as you fly over this bridge, you won't have to pay any tariffs." Xiao Hua unhappily looked at Xiao Jian. He clapped his hand and took out a low-grade spirit stone, throwing it to Li Xinyu and said, "This old man doesn't have the gold and silver used in the secular world. This is a primeval stone. What do you think?" "Immortal Master." Li Xinyu didn't expect Xiao Hua to be so amiable and actually take out a celestial stone. He hurriedly and carefully caught it, smiling apologetically, "You don't have to do this. The order is just to prevent people from pretending to be outsiders. Since Immortal Master is an outsider, you naturally don't have to pay customs duties." "How can this old man take back what he took out?" Xiao Hua said indifferently, "You are also a general of a region, so you still have to abide by this order. Besides, this old man doesn't care about a single primeval stone." Yes, this little one understands." Li Xinyu lowered his head. "Can this old man leave now?" Xiao Hua asked politely again. Li Xinyu hurriedly stretched out his hand and pulled the reins of Xiao Hua's horse, saying respectfully, "This little one will send Immortal Master over." Thank you for your trouble." Xiao Hua smiled and nodded. "Damn it, a single primeval stone. It's gone just like that." Xiao Jian watched as Li Xinyu put the primeval stone into his pocket. His eyes turned into hooks, wanting to hook the primeval stone out of Li Xinyu's pocket. He complained in his heart. Li Xinyu led Xiao Hua's horse all the way to the middle of the bridge before stopping. He bowed and said, Immortal Master, after crossing this bridge, the border of Jianghu country will be there. This little one doesn't dare to cross, so this little one can only send you here. Okay, thank you generally. Xiao Hua nodded his head and patted the horse. The horse took small steps and crossed the blood-red mark in the middle of the bridge. At this moment, a burst of noise that sounded like the chirping of birds came from the distant horizon. At the same time, a gust of wind blew, causing the various flags on the bridge to flutter in the wind. Lie, lie, lie. The pitiful horse let out a mournful cry, as if it was extremely scared. It kicked its four hooves and was about to rush down the bridge. Xiao Hua frowned and coldly snorted. The horse immediately felt its body become heavier. Don't talk about running, it couldn't even stand stably. Just as the horse was about to collapse on the ground, Xiao Hua floated down and patted the horse. The horse obediently lay down on the bridge. Caw caw caw. The sound of birds chirping turned into a burst of horse laughter. It came from the right side of the bridge. A black cloud flew over from there and quickly passed by everyone's eyes. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over and saw an extremely ugly demon within the black cloud. Its body was covered in black fur, but it was holding an almost naked woman in its embrace. The woman was as beautiful as a flower, her skin was whiter than snow. Her lotus-like arms were wrapped around the demon's neck. The black and white contrast between the two people was extremely clear within the black cloud. These two people didn't seem to care about the secular people on the ground at all. They seemed to be teasing them as they rushed forward and disappeared. See? Isn't that a demon? Xiao Hua was a little shocked. Looking at the trembling Li Xinyu not far away, he asked curiously, how can it come and go so freely in Jianghu country and Shi country? Good, Senior Immortal knows. Li Xinyu lowered his voice and said, this demon is not from my Shi country. In the middle of Jianghu country, Bronze Pillar country and Jianghu country, there is a black cloud ridge. It is a place that the three countries are unable to take care of. If I'm not wrong, this demon should be from the Black Cloud Ridge. Oh, Senior Immortal, if you go to Bronze Pillar country, you naturally won't be able to, but if you still want to go from Bronze Pillar country to Jianghu country, then you will have to pass by the Black Cloud Ridge. Senior Immortal must be careful. I heard that many people have been buried there. Yes, this old man knows. Xiao Hua nodded. He floated onto the horse and was about to enter Jianghu country. Senior Immortal, Senior Immortal? Another voice came from behind Xiao Hua and the rest. Xiao Hua turned his head to look, only to see an old man with white hair and a beard catching up to them while panting. Xiao Hua looked at the old man and frowned. It was obvious that this was an old man from the secular world. He looked to be around 60 years old. To be honest, compared to Xiao Hua's age, he was really like a child. However, Xiao Hua looked to be in his 20s. When facing this kind of white-haired old man, he felt a kind of pressure in his heart. He would naturally call him an old man, and would also naturally call him a brat. Could this be the legendary judging a book by its cover? Xiao Hua rubbed his nose and laughed bitterly to himself. What's the matter, old man? Fortunately, before Xiao Hua could speak, Xiao Jian had already stood in front of Xiao Hua. Greetings, Taoist. The old man bowed respectfully. This old man is Qi Jin from the Sun Hai Trading Company. I came to look for Taoist. There is something I would like to discuss with Taoist. As he spoke, the old man glanced at Xiao Hua. Xiao Jian frowned and said curiously, I and the others don't have a place to stay, and we don't have any training grounds. If old man has any wish to fulfill, I'm afraid I and the others won't be able to satisfy it. Taoist. Qi Jin's face had a trace of pleading as he said in a low voice, this old man doesn't want to pray for the gods. This old man has another matter to discuss with Taoist. Possible? I would like to ask Taoist to cross the bridge with your master and wait by the roadside. This old man will explain everything. As he spoke, Qi Jin took out a small silver ingot and stuffed it into Xiao Jian's hand. He said, in addition, my Sun Hai Trading Company will pay for the customs for Taoist and the others to enter Jianghu country. I only hope that Taoist can hear about this matter. Xiao Jian touched the silver ingot and felt it was slippery. His heart was already blooming with joy. He turned to look at Xiao Hua and said with a smile, "Senior, what do you think?" "Hee, you have already agreed, so why ask this old man?" Xiao Hua smiled. At this time, he already had a plan for the road ahead. Everything was just a kind of experience. No matter what the old man's request was, in Xiao Hua's eyes, it might not be difficult. Even Xiao Hua had some intuition that it was related to the evil spirit in the black clouds. "Ai's master has agreed. I will wait for you at the front." Xiao Jian looked at the many carriages lined up behind the old man and knew that this was the Sun Hai Trading Company's fleet. It would take them a lot of time to cross the border. Yes, thank you Taoist, thank you Immortal. Qi Jin was overjoyed at the unexpected good news. He bowed and hurriedly ran to the back. Following his shouts, a burst of laughter rang out. Some of the people next to the carriages saluted Xiao Hua and the others. Xiao Hua didn't care about these people's thanks. Instead, he asked in astonishment, "Xiao Jian, could it be that, after crossing the border between Xi and Jiasa country, not only do we have to pay customs in Xi, but also in Jiasa country?" "Senior." Xiao Jian pulled the reins of his horse and followed Xiao Hua down the bridge. He explained, "That's right. However, people and goods are different. People only have to pay 10 copper coins for crossing the border, while goods have to pay according to the value of the goods." Isn't this robbery?" Xiao Hua immediately thought of the perverted sea beast he encountered in the West Sea. What was the difference between this and a sea beast? If there was any difference, it would be that they were openly using the banner of righteousness, making it impossible for people to avoid. Chapter 32-37. Senior, this is different. If the goods of Sun Hai Trading Company are bought in Xi, there must be an official document to pay the tax. Here, there is no need to pay. If the Sun Hai Trading Company is passing through Xi, they have already paid the tax when entering Xi. When leaving Xi, there is no need to pay again. Xiao Jian explained with a smile. However, looking at Qi Jin's appearance, it seems that they have traded in Xi. Moreover, there is no official document to pay the tax. At the border, they must pay a certain percentage of the tax. Then when they enter Jiasa country, they must pay the tax. Xiao Hua asked. "That is natural. This tax is from Xi, the other side is from Jiasa country." Xiao Jian nodded. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. "Alas, this business is not easy. The tax is an important part of a country's income and expenditure. It is impossible to exempt it." Xiao Jian said with familiarity, "Of course, it is not only for business, but also for anything in this world. Even if it is to be the ruler of a country." While speaking, several people went down the bridge. Sure enough, under the bridge, there were some people similar to the soldiers of Xi. However, their armor and flags were completely different. Everyone entered the border of Jiasa country. Half a mile away from the bridge, there was a tea shed. Xiao Hua looked at the scorching sun above his head and ordered them to rest near the tea shed. After waiting for a full meal's time, they saw nearly 20 carriages led by Qi Jin coming out of the soldiers' blockade. When Qi Jin saw the carriages parked in front of the tea shed, the disappointment on his face immediately disappeared. He urged the horse under him and hurriedly brought a man dressed in martial arts clothes to the tea shed. There were not many people in the tea shed. Xiao Hua and the other three were sitting at a shabby table. Except for Yuan Ye, who was drinking cup after cup of tea, the other three closed their eyes and did not speak. "Taoist." Qi Jin rushed into the tea shed. He originally wanted to talk to Xiao Hua, but after thinking for a moment, he walked to Xiao Jian and cupped his fist. "Our humble trading company has too many goods. It is a bit troublesome to pass the customs. Sorry for the long wait." "No matter." Xiao Jian opened his eyes and smiled. "We are just traveling. Whether we walk or lie down, it is all cultivation. This wait is nothing." Taoist is really a master. What you said is really profound. Qi Jin looked at Xiao Jian with an extremely admiring gaze. "This old man and the others have worked so hard for Audu's item. I don't know when we'll be free. When it's time to be free, you'll definitely be free. When you can't be free, just say it." Xiao Jian was much more familiar with these words than Xiao Hua. "Yes, Yes, this old man understands. Qi Jin put his palms together sincerely. However, when he saw Xiao Jian's unfriendly expression, he immediately understood. He put his palms down awkwardly and pointed at the burly man beside him. Escort Chen, this is the Taoist Xiao I mentioned just now. Come and meet him. I'm Chen Kai from Fu Wei Escort Agency. Nice to meet you, Taoist masters. The burly man stood up and cupped his fists in greeting. His voice was loud and clear, but there was a valiance and unwillingness in his eyes. Boundless holy man, Chen Zhuang, greetings. Xiao Jian seemed to understand something and returned the greeting with a smile. He then looked at Qi Jin and said, Elder Qi, what do you mean by this? This. Qi Jin was a little embarrassed and explained his intentions. It was as Xiao Jian had expected. The distance from the border of Jiasa country to the nearest city was about 100 miles. There was a section of the mountain road that was quite dangerous. There were 3 groups of mountain bandits alone. These mountain bandits often went down the mountain to rob, and the merchants passing by were all terrified. Jiasa country had sent troops to kill them several times, but they returned without success. In the end, they simply ignored them and let these mountain bandits fend for themselves. Since the mountain bandits were born, how could they be destroyed? Although the leader and number of the mountain bandits were constantly changing, these mountain bandits had become a malignant tumor at the border of Jiasa country. Unfortunately, there was only one main road from the kingdom of Shi to the kingdom of Jiasa. On the left side of the mountain road, there was an impassable forest. Therefore, even if a merchant like the Sun Hai Trading Company knew that there were bandits here, they could only brace themselves and pass through. At best, they could hire more armed escorts like the Fu Wei Escort Agency to protect their own trading company. Qi Jin had just seen the Shi general's unusual respect for Xiao Hua, so he had a sudden idea to ask Xiao Hua and the others to protect him through this section of the mountain road where the mountain bandits were rampant. Although Xiao Hua and the others were not escorts, Qi Jin's lack of trust in Fu Wei Escort Agency and his behavior of seeking medical treatment halfway through the journey made Escort Chen extremely dissatisfied. Chen Kai didn't say anything, but how could Xiao Jian not see the disdain and even a faint hostility in his eyes? He had seen this kind of look in Zen Master Ming Yu's eyes more than once. If I had known, I wouldn't have collected Qi Jin's silver. Xiao Jian was somewhat regretful. After listening to Qi Jin's explanation, he already understood that these mountain bandits couldn't have appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, they lived so freely at such a close distance to the border. If it weren't for the fact that they had nothing to do with the border guards of Jiasa country, Xiao Jian wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. As for Qi Jin's intention, Xiao Jian was even more aware. Qi Jin didn't necessarily want to rely on their martial strength. What he valued was Li Xianyu's respect for Xiao Hua. Qi Jin thought that since they were familiar with Li Xianyu and the others, when they encountered the mountain bandits ahead, they would definitely make the mountain bandits hesitate. As for this reason, Qi Jin couldn't tell Chen Kai or Xiao Jian directly. He could only use a probing tone to ask Xiao Jian and the others to protect them. Damn it, we're all smart people. After Xiao Jian felt regretful, he subconsciously looked at Xiao Hua. It was obvious that they couldn't have any relationship with the border guards. Li Xianyu's respect was for Xiao Hua and that piece of vitality stone. Facing the mountain bandits, not to mention himself, even Yuanyang might not be able to protect himself. How could Xiao Jian dare to make a decision? Oh, Escort Chen. Contrary to Xiao Jian's expectations, a trace of joy flashed across Xiao Hua's face. He asked, "Let this old man ask you, do you know the Lotus Escort Agency?" Lotus Escort Agency? A trace of vigilance flashed across Chen Kai's eyes. He asked curiously, "Taoist knows the people of the escort agency? Tell this old man, do you know the Lotus Escort Agency?" Hearing Chen Kai's answer, Xiao Hua's eyes flashed. He seemed to be somewhat ecstatic as he asked hurriedly. Chen Kai shivered. Xiao Hua's gaze was like lightning, as if it pierced into his heart, giving him a big fright. The dissatisfaction in his heart had long been thrown out of the highest clouds. He hurriedly replied, "Good, Immortal Elder knows. This one has never heard of the Lotus Escort Agency." Xiao Hua snorted coldly, appearing extremely dissatisfied. Immortal Elder. Chen Kai's forehead was somewhat sweaty. Facing Xiao Hua's dissatisfaction, he felt an indescribable feeling of oppression and powerlessness. It was as if facing Xiao Hua was a huge mountain that could crush him into meat paste at any time. Now he truly knew how powerful Xiao Hua was. This one has heard of the Lotus Escort Agency, Swallow Escort Agency, Jinfeng Escort Agency, but I've never heard of the Lotus Escort Agency. What about the Misty Sect? Xiao Hua knew that there wouldn't be any definite answer, but he still asked in a low voice. This one has also never heard of it. Sweat dripped down Chen Kai's face. His knees almost went soft. He really couldn't face Xiao Hua's incredulous gaze. This lowly one is just an ordinary escort. What Immortal Elder is talking about, this lowly one doesn't know. Ooh, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. He sighed again in his heart. AI, escort. Isn't this one's second brother an escort? Lotus Escort Agency, Misty Sect? Why should this one make things difficult for an ordinary escort? Xiao Hua let out a breath. Chen Kai immediately felt that the danger that could easily crush him to death had suddenly disappeared. Only then did he involuntarily stretch out his hand and wipe the sweat off his forehead. His heart also relaxed as if a huge rock had been removed. Immortal Elder. Qi Jin naturally saw Chen Kai's sorry state and was even more overjoyed in his heart. Seeing that Xiao Hua's expression was good, he hurriedly said in a low voice, "This old one is so bold as to ask Immortal Elder to come with us. We will properly serve Immortal Elder along the way, AI?" Xiao Hua ignored Qi Jin and raised his head to look at the road outside the tea shed. His gaze was somewhat blurred, as if he saw the end of the road and also the end of time. It was when Qi Jin mentioned the escort agency and the escorts that those distant memories began to appear like fragments. Lotus Flower Escort Agency, Armed Escort Agency, escorts, and other unfamiliar terms appeared like a fountain. He couldn't help but have the urge to ask. He really wanted to get what he wanted from this escort called Chen Kai. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua was still disappointed. Perhaps they're not far away? Xiao Hua's heart was somewhat moved. The arena, the village, the escort agency, these are all things that Xiaoyu continent doesn't have. They're all from this one's memory, senior. Xiao Jian's voice was indistinct again, as if it came from the horizon and woke Xiao Hua up from his homesickness. We have to go either way. Why don't we go together? Up to you. Xiao Hua's face was as calm as water, and it was impossible to tell if he was happy or angry. However, Xiao Jian already knew that Xiao Hua was somewhat unhappy, so he hurriedly said, "If senior likes peace and quiet, we won't follow the caravan." "There's no need." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "If we want to follow, then let's follow. It's good to be able to give them a helping hand." "Yes, Junior understands." Xiao Jian's mouth revealed a smile. He turned to Qi Jin and said, "Why aren't you thanking Taoist Xiao?" Yes. Thank you Taoist Xiao, thank you Taoist Xiao." Qi Jin was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed. He then pulled Xiao Jian's sleeve and hurriedly left, as if he had something to say. Chen Kai couldn't stand Xiao Hua's imposing manner and also took the opportunity to slip away. Seeing that everyone had left, Xiao Hua looked at Yuanya and said, "Yuanya, why haven't you spoken these days? Have you had enough of this tea?" "Taoist, Junior doesn't know how to speak. I might as well not speak." Yuanya drank another cup of tea and placed the somewhat tattered teacup on the table. "Junior will go get a carriage." Chapter 32-38. With that, Yuanya hurriedly got up and hurriedly walked out. Hee. Xiao Hua looked at Yuanya's back and then looked at Lu Yi, who was sitting beside Yuanya and had closed his eyes to think after drinking a few mouthfuls of tea. Xiao Hua brought Lu Yi out of the tea shed. The carriages of Sun Hai Trading Company had already started to move. Qi Jin and Xiao Jian came out from behind a big tree. Both of them had a satisfied expression and seemed to be chatting happily. As for Chen Kai, he was already riding a horse in front of the carriages. Lu. Xiao Hua's gaze swept across the tea shed. The owner of the tea shed was lowering his head to clean the tables while secretly glancing at the carriages. He coldly snorted and turned to Lu Yi and asked, "Have you comprehended this cultivation technique?" "Yes, Immortal Elder knows." Hearing Xiaohua's question, Lu Yi opened his eyes and revealed a complicated expression. "Under Immortal Elder's guidance, this little one has already comprehended it yesterday?" "Huh? You already comprehended it yesterday? How many days has it been?" Xiaohua was shocked. He looked at Lu Yi from top to bottom. After all, Xiaohua was not a competent master and didn't know how to teach other people cultivation methods. Lu Yi was just an ordinary person and had never come into contact with Taoist cultivation methods before. Lu Yi was a little shy, but his eyes revealed a trace of pride. He whispered, "If it is as Immortal Elder said, this little one has already comprehended it. Then, can you sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth?" Xiaohua asked impatiently. Lu Yi shook his head regretfully. "This little one cannot sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that Immortal Elder spoke of. I don't know if this little one's comprehension is wrong or this little one does not have this kind of aptitude." Xiaohua nodded. "Get on the carriage, this old man wants to hear your comprehension." Yuanya watched Xiaohua bring Lu Yi onto the carriage and then the carriage became silent. Although he could see their mouths moving, he could not hear anything and knew that this was Xiaohua's technique. He sighed slightly and drove the carriage to the back of the Sun Hai Trading Company. However, when he sighed, the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. This smile was somewhat mysterious. After about half a meal's worth of time, Xiaohua, who was inside the carriage, sighed like Yuanya. He looked at Lu Yi and smiled bitterly. "Lu Yi, it's not that this old man is praising you, but your aptitude is incomparable. You have indeed thoroughly comprehended this cultivation technique, and there is no mistake about it. But even so, I'm afraid it's because your physique isn't good enough that you're unable to sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth." "Yes, Taoist priest, I understand." At this time, when Lu Yi heard Xiaohua's praise, his eyes lit up. He smiled and said, "Taoist priest has already said this at the beginning. This little one has a plan in mind. This lowly one is already fortunate enough to have a glimpse of the immortal cultivation technique. As for whether or not I have the fate to cultivate, this lowly one doesn't care anymore." "Yes, it's great that you have such intentions. I'm just afraid that you're too ambitious." Xiaohua nodded and said, "Since that's the case, this old man will teach you another cultivation technique. You can try it again." "Yes, I'll listen to Taoist priest's instructions." Lu Yi nodded vigorously. After Xiaohua passed on a simple water-type cultivation method to Lu Yi, he once again irresponsibly gave him a few small dates, allowing Lu Yi to comprehend it himself. Xiaohua himself once again exited the carriage, riding on the back of a horse, leisurely and contentedly admiring the scenery outside the main road. "Brother ya." After Xiaohua left, Lu Yi closed his eyes for a long time. After carefully memorizing the cultivation technique, he walked to the front of the carriage and sat down cross-legged. He whispered, "You've worked hard these past few days." It's not hard at all." When Yuanya heard this, he didn't turn his head. He shook the reins and stabilized the horse pulling the carriage. He said, "Now that you have an opportunity, you must properly grasp it. The Immortal is a good person. It's our great fortune to have met him. He won't be able to stay with us for too long. You must cultivate well and strive to have the Immortal accept you as his disciple and take you away." It's easier said than done. It's too difficult." Lu Yi sighed. "Since I was young, I boasted that I was smart and had a photographic memory. But look at the hundreds of words the Immortal gave me." Shoo! Yuanya, who didn't know much about the ways of the world, was suddenly shocked and hurriedly said, "Brother Lu, you can't say this anymore. Only you know it." "Yes, I understand." Lu Yi hurriedly smiled. "Taoist priest only said that I can't pass it to others. He didn't say that I can't nag. If the Immortal says one, you must think two." Yuanya wanted to say something, but looking at Lu Yi, he didn't know how to express it. "In short, you know this better than me. It's better not to make the Immortal angry." "Yes, I will remember." Lu Yi looked at Yuanya, who didn't speak much, and his heart warmed. He handed the spirit dates in his hand to Yuanya and said, "This is the date given by the Immortal. I haven't eaten it yet. Try." But Yuanya didn't hesitate. He reached out and took it. He threw it into the air and was about to use his mouth to catch it. "If you don't want to die, then don't eat it like this." Xiao Hua's voice drifted over. The thumb-sized spirit jujube stopped in midair. Yuanya raised his head and waited foolishly. At this moment, the carriage suddenly sped up. Yuanya's body involuntarily fell down on the carriage. With a pada sound, the spirit jujube fell down and hit Yuanya's nose. Gidge! A burst of laughter suddenly sounded, like a string of silver bells swaying to the left of Yuanya. A red pony happily ran past Yuanya. Not only was the pony's mane fine and smooth, but there were also strands of light coming from the saddle and other things on the pony's back. There were also traces of red mist coming from where the pony's hooves touched the ground. It was as if the pony didn't touch the ground at all, and it didn't make the slightest sound. Looking at the little red horse, there was a woman dressed in red. Her face was covered with a layer of red veil. Although her figure was graceful, her face couldn't be seen clearly. The laughter came from the woman's veil. As the woman laughed, the little red horse galloped past Yuanya's carriage, and a faint fragrance wafted through the wind. Jianghu! Yuanya was originally lying on his back, but when he heard the laughter, it was as if he had seen a ghost. His face suddenly turned pale, and he used all his strength to push his arms back. His entire body flew out of the carriage as he screamed in disbelief. Gidge! Gidge! The silver bells continued to ring, but they were getting further and further away. The little red horse was very handsome. In a short moment, it had already caught up to the front of the Sun Hai Trading Company. Jianghu! Yuanya groaned. Before he even landed, he stepped on the horse pulling the carriage and wanted to chase after Di Fui. "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" A rough voice came from behind, followed by the rumbling of horse hooves. The entire avenue was shaking. Everyone looked up and saw a cloud of dust rising from the bridge that they had just stepped off. A group of cavalrymen wearing pitch-black armor and riding pitch-black horses were chasing after them with long spears in their hands. Although this group of soldiers was quite far from the woman in red, everyone, including Xiao Hua, thought that this group of soldiers was the woman's bodyguard. The soldiers were in a line of 3, almost occupying the entire road. Under the rough shouts, the workers and bodyguards of the Sun Hai Trading Company hurriedly moved the carriages to the side, trying their best to make way for the soldiers. As for Yuanya, he had already landed on the second carriage in front of him. However, the soldiers in front of the group of soldiers had already raised their spears. Hidden behind their helmets, their gazes were like sharp swords as they stared at Yuanya. "Yuanya, come down," Xiao Hua said indifferently. "You won't be able to catch up." But Yuanya stood on the roof of the carriage. His face was filled with an indescribable excitement and reluctance. In the distance, at the end of the road, the woman's figure was like a burning cloud. Yuanya knew that he really wouldn't be able to catch up. Hurry up and come down." Seeing the dozens of soldiers in black armor turn their heads to look at Yuanya, the spears in their hands were raised. If Yuanya made any strange movements, these spears would not hesitate to stab at him. Xiao Jian hurriedly shouted, "This? I don't know which country's black armor army this is." "Yes." Yuanya looked into the distance with some unwillingness before looking to the left and right. Only then did he jump down from the carriage. Rumble! The black armor army quickly galloped past under everyone's gaze. There were more than 100 of them and their movements were uniform. Even the hooves of the 100 black horses were almost the same. When the black armor army was far away, the workers of the Sun Hai Trading Company urged the carriages to move again. The dozens of carriages slowly moved again, leaving Yuanya standing on the side of the road in a daze as he lightly bit his lips. Xiao Jian asked curiously, "This is the Jianghu you were talking about? She doesn't seem to know you." She was only around 3 years old at that time. How did she know me? Yuanya suddenly understood something and smiled bitterly. Also, I gave her the name Jianghu. She might not know it herself. What? Xiao Jian's eyes widened and he almost laughed out loud. The woman you yearned for day and night was actually with you when you were 3 years old? How could she possibly know you? You aren't joking with your master, right? No. Yuan Ye's emotions surged and he lost his usual calmness. Have you only seen her once? Also, you couldn't have seen her real appearance just now. Xiaohua was also curious and asked softly, how many years has it been? The Jianghu of 3 years old and the Jianghu now? How could they be the same? How could you recognize her? All right, Immortal Elder knows. Yuan Ye's face finally revealed a trace of blood as he proudly said, when I heard her laughter, I knew it was her. Also, whether Immortal Elder believes it or not, I can smell Diawu's scent. Chapter 32-39. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat as he recalled the first time he saw Fairy Hongxia. Didn't the red mole at the corner of Fairy Hongxia's mouth give him a familiar feeling? Xiaohua nodded slightly. Diawu is pretty good looking, Xiaohua said softly as he looked at Yuan Ye's dazed expression. Furthermore, this old man has already left a mark on her body. As long as it's within 100 li, this old man will definitely be able to detect it. Really? Yuan Ye's eyes were filled with ecstasy as he clenched his fists tightly. His arms were trembling. Hee. Xiaohua laughed but did not reply. Haha. Yuan Ye jumped up and somersaulted a few times in the air before landing on the ground. He was clearly extremely happy. Looking at Yuan Ye's appearance, Xiaohua rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly. Damn it, it's good to be young. No, this old man can't take advantage of his seniority in the future. There's no reason for me to be so lifeless, it's really boring. Yes, wasn't Xiaohua the same as he was in the past? However, after coming out of seclusion for 100 years, he felt that he was old for no reason. He kept calling himself this old man. It really felt like he was past his prime. This Xiao is just over 200 years old. If I reach nascent soul, my lifespan can reach 2,000 years. Compared to an ordinary person, I'm only around 10 years old. Damn it, this Xiao is still underage. Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh. Senior? Xiao Jian looked at Xiaohua strangely. This senior had beaten Xiaohua from the peak to the bottom of the valley in an instant. It's nothing. Xiaohua's face immediately became as cold as ice. Then, he raised his eyebrows and unhappily looked towards the horizon 100 zhang away. There were a few pigeon-like birds that were quickly flying past. Xiaohua snorted coldly. Those birds suddenly fell down and fainted when they landed on the mountain rocks. As the saying goes, snakes and rats are in the same nest. It's really like that. Xiaohua's gaze turned and looked at the tea shed in the distance. Brother Ya. Seeing Yuan Ye happily land on the carriage, Lu Yi was also happy for him. He carefully handed the spirit jujube that had fallen on the carriage to him. You're really amazing. You've already decided on a marriage at the age of 3. I really envy you. Slap. Yuan Ye raised his hand and slapped the back of Lu Yi's head. He scolded, How am I as despicable as you think? I was only 7 or 8 years old at that time. Tell me, what is going on? Just as Yuan Ye finished speaking, another person appeared out of thin air. That person's voice was extremely wretched. Yuan Ye was furious. Just as he was about to scold him, he saw who it was and immediately smiled apologetically. Immortal Elderly, why are you here? Tell me, Xiaohua said with a smile. I've heard you play the Sun in the River Tide Temple. At that time, I didn't see Diawu, but now, this old man knows what Diawu looks like. If you don't tell me, Yuan Ye helplessly looked at Xiaohua's disrespectful appearance. He then looked at Xiao Jian, who was riding a horse and pretending not to care. However, his ears were already perked up. Yuan Ye could only drive the carriage and tell the story of what happened. Yuan Ye had lived in the mystic jade dark forest since he was young. He danced with the wild wolves in the forest. When he was 5 years old, the black wolf that raised him was bitten and seriously injured when it was fighting for territory with another wolf. The night the black wolf died, Yuan Ye took the black wolf's corpse into the depths of the wolf valley. He wanted to bury the black wolf. However, on that full moon night, Yuanya heard the faint cry of a baby. This was the first time Yuanya had seen a human baby. It was the first time he had seen a human like himself. Therefore, after burying the black wolf's corpse, he brought the baby back to the wolf's den. However, the arrival of the baby attracted the attention of the pack of wolves. Perhaps because they no longer had the black wolf's protection, the pack of wolves wanted to chase Yuanya away. Thus, a fight broke out between Yuanya and the pack of wolves again. The 5-year-old Yuanya was naturally no match for the pack of wolves. After being bitten and covered in cuts and bruises, he carried the baby, whose left arm was also injured, out of the wolf's den. At that time, the baby should have just been born. It cried loudly and had a high fever after being attacked by the pack of wolves. Yuanya naturally did not understand this. He only thought that the baby was hungry, so he caught rabbits and roasted them for the baby to eat. How could a newborn baby eat these things? Just as Yuanya was helpless and the baby was on the verge of death, a group of colorful butterflies fluttered their enchanting wings in the morning light and flew past Yuanya and the baby. The baby seemed to be attracted by the colorful butterflies. Perhaps it had run out of strength and stopped crying hysterically. This made Yuanya very happy. Ignoring the cuts and bruises all over his body, he carried the baby and followed the butterflies to the side of a lake. At the side of the lake, there was a doe that had just given birth. It was mournfully licking the dead baby. It was in so much pain that it wished to die. Looking at the lifeless baby and the milk dripping from the doe's mouth, Yuanya suddenly understood something. He quickly caught the doe and used its milk to feed the baby. After eating its fill, the baby fell asleep and slept for half a day. After half a day, it cried loudly and ate the milk again. After a few days like this, the baby's fever subsided and the wounds on its left arm healed. However, the wolfsbane had left a long scar on the baby's arm. Other than a small blanket and a sun, the baby had nothing else. Yuanya himself did not have a name, but he gave the baby the name Jianghu. Just like this, Yuanya, Jianghu, and the doe that had lost its baby lived by the side of the butterfly pond. Jianghu gradually grew up, from swaddling clothes to learning to walk, and then to babbling. They lived there for 3 years. During these 3 years, Yuanya would go hunting during the day and Jianghu would stay with the doe. At night, Yuanya would accompany Jianghu and play the sun for her. Every time he played the sun, Jianghu would obediently lie in Yuanya's arms and look at him with sparkling eyes that were like the stars in the sky. These happy days lasted until one day. Yuanya remembered it very clearly. It was a stormy day. Yuanya woke up early to hunt as usual, but before he could catch any prey, he suddenly felt uneasy. It was as if they had a telepathic connection. Yuanya hurriedly ran back to Butterfly Lake. As expected, the side of Butterfly Lake was covered in blood. The doe had been killed on the ground and there were light footprints beside it. Yuanya angrily followed the footprints out of Butterfly Lake. Unfortunately, under the heavy rain, Yuanya quickly lost track of the enemy. Helpless, Yuanya left Butterfly Lake and searched the entire Mystic Jade Dark Forest to find Jianghu. Unfortunately, Yuanya had underestimated the Mystic Jade Dark Forest. He had spent 5 years and had not even explored half of the forest. The remaining areas were filled with fierce beasts that Yuanya could not deal with. Yuanya had gathered his courage and tried to deal with a fierce beast that he thought he could handle. However, he was heavily injured by the fierce beast and was captured by a hunter who had entered the Mystic Jade Dark Forest. After that, Yuanya was taken out of the Mystic Jade Dark Forest and sold to the arena. Speaking of the arena, Yuanya seemed to be touched by something sad. His face revealed a sorrowful expression as he raised his hand and placed the spirit jujube in his mouth. Just as he was about to fiercely chew on it to relieve the dryness in his mouth, Xiao Hua's interested voice sounded out again. Tiskeske? What an unforgettable love between childhood sweethearts. This old man advises you to eat it bit by bit. Otherwise, you will never see your Jianghu again. Xiao Hua's words were naturally not as fast as Yuanya's actions. However, before Yuanya heard Xiao Hua's words, he seemed to have lost all his strength. No matter how hard he tried, he could not bite down. Only after Xiao Hua finished speaking did he regain consciousness. He. Yuanya laughed embarrassedly and lightly bit down on a piece of spirit jujube. In an instant, his mouth was filled with a sweet fragrance. This sweet fragrance was something that Yuanya, who had lived in the forest since young, had never tasted before. When he greedily chewed up the spirit jujube and swallowed it into his stomach, an indescribable warmth rushed into his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. A comfortable feeling spread through his limbs and bones. Yuanya could not help but moan. He licked his lips, wanting to take another bite. However, he was extremely reluctant. Seeing that Yuanya was about to hide the spirit jujube in his bosom like a meat bun, Xiaohua laughed. No need to be so stingy. This old man has a lot of these things. If you want to eat some, you can ask this old man anytime. As he spoke, he took out 2 more spirit jujubes and threw them to Yuanya. Yuanya stretched out his hands and very nimbly caught them, immediately keeping them in his bosom. Ai, how pitiful! Xiaohua stood up and stood on the carriage. He sighed. You and Jianghu? Perhaps it was the enmity from your previous life. If you don't owe her, then she owes you. However, the heavens threw the 2 of you together at such a young age. Tiske now. You know her, but how could she know you? Moreover, she is now a descendant of some royal family. What about you? Such unrealistic thoughts should be put aside for now. At this point, Xiaohua suddenly froze. He looked at Lu Yi, who was eating a spirit jujube with his eyes closed. Although Yuanya and Jianghu's story sounded a little absurd, wasn't it similar to Lu Yi and Xiao Yun's experience? One was a wild boy who grew up in the forest, the other was a descendant of a royal family. One was a shrew in the marketplace, the other was a princess of the water tribe. Immortal elder. Yuanya's face was slightly red. He smiled and said, You're thinking too much. Jianghu is a family member to this junior. Moreover, she is his first family member. This junior is very concerned about her life and death. Since she is living well, this junior can rest assured. Whether she knows this junior or not, whether she sees this junior or not, it doesn't matter. Ai, what an ill-fated relationship. Not far away, Xiao Jian's ears drooped. He sighed and did not say anything else, as if he was warning Yuanya. Taoist elder. Just as Xiaohua was about to say something, Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes in surprise and shouted, This junior knows what spiritual energy is. Chapter 3240. A strange expression appeared on Xiaohua's face. He didn't dare to give Lu Yi too many spirit fruits and only gave him the lowest grade spirit jujube. Firstly, it was to let him eat until he was full. Secondly, it was to let him experience the spiritual items of Taoism. Xiaohua didn't place too much hope on the spirit jujube. However, Xiaohua still underestimated the spirit jujube in his space and also underestimated Lu Yi's aptitude. Just this one spirit jujube was enough for Lu Yi to grasp the spirit jujube as a small foot. You should first experience it and don't do anything else. Xiaohua thought for a moment and instructed, My Taoism's divine abilities all rely on the spirit jujube of heaven and earth. If you can't experience the spirit jujube of heaven and earth, just relying on these spirit fruits, it's impossible for you to step onto the path of Tao. Yes, this little one understands. Lu Yi was very happy. He took another bite of the spirit jujube and closed his eyes to experience it. Looking at Lu Yi's excited appearance, Xiaohua inwardly sighed. Lu Yi's aptitude was indeed not bad. Not only was he able to comprehend a qi refining cultivation method that he had never cultivated before, he was also able to keenly sense the faint spiritual energy within the spirit jujube. This was absolutely impossible for the previous Xiaohua. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was even more clear that if Lu Yi couldn't sense the spirit jujube of heaven and earth, it would be impossible for him to step onto the threshold of cultivation. Without the spirit jujube of heaven and earth, all of Taoism's cultivation was just a castle in the air. After entering Jiasa country, other than encountering the black armored army led by Jianghu at the bridge, there were no other unforeseen events. The caravan of Sun Hai Trading Company moved forward in an extremely orderly manner. When night came, someone led them to a spacious mountain ridge to rest. The caravan was prepared. Not long after, Qi Jin led 2 people and brought some food to Xiao Hua and the others. What made Xiao Jian depressed was that other than his own stomach being hungry, Lu Yi and Yuan Ye didn't feel hungry or thirsty at all. They didn't even drink a mouthful of water. Compared to Xiao Jian's depression, Qi Jin was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. Otherworldly, what does this mean? This means that the immortal in front of me is really an immortal. As for the Taoist priest who took his silver coins, he was just like him, a layman. After Qi Jin left, Xiao Jian gnawed on a stewed pig trotter. Although the pig trotter was very fragrant, Xiao Jian's eyes were filled with hidden bitterness as he looked at Xiao Hua, who was cultivating with his eyes closed. His mouth was tasteless. Xiao Hua ignored him and seemed to have fallen asleep. After the meal, a bonfire was lit in the middle of the group of carriages. The escorts and some of the workers from the trading companies took out food and wine, and even gambling equipment. They started to make a ruckus. Seeing this lively scene, the eyes of Xiao Jian, who had been silent all this time and felt somewhat out of place with Xiao Hua, suddenly lit up. He glanced at Xiao Hua from the corner of his eyes and quietly walked over. However, he had only taken a few steps when Yuan Ye hurriedly got up and followed him out. When they reached the shadow of a carriage, Yuan Ye hurriedly caught up with Xiao Jian and said in a low voice, "Master, for you." What? Xiao Jian was stunned. When he saw Yuan Ye carefully take out a spirit jujube wrapped in an oil bag from his bosom, his face turned cold. "But," he slapped the oil bag away and said, "This old man doesn't need the pity of others. This old man has eaten a lot of these spirit fruits in the past." After he finished speaking, he ignored Yuan Ye and quickly walked away. The embers of the bonfire gradually extinguished in the night wind. Xiao Jian happily walked back while humming a tune. He lay down near the carriage and quickly fell asleep. In the night, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and indifferently swept a glance at everything that was somewhat messy. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of ridicule. The Taoist divine sense was actually used by Xiao Jian in gambling. I'm afraid that if the Tao sovereign above the 9th heaven knew, he would fly down in anger to punish Xiao Jian, right? On the 2nd and 3rd days, they didn't encounter the bandits that Qi Jin was worried about. Everything was normal. Moreover, there were more carriages on the road. Not only were there bodyguards from the Sunhai Trading Company, there were also bodyguards from other trading companies. It seemed that even if bandits came out, there was no need for Xiao Hua and the others to make a move. These bodyguards could handle it. Qi Jin and the other managers of the trading company were happy, but on the other hand, Xiao Jian couldn't be happy. His divine sense was originally weak. On the first day, it was exhausted. This divine sense won him a lot of money. However, on the 2nd and 3rd day, there were more bodyguards participating in the gambling. Xiao Jian no longer had any means to cheat. He didn't know if it was because of bad luck or other reasons, but Xiao Jian lost again and again. At the beginning, Xiao Jian wanted to withdraw in time. Unfortunately, he won too much on the first day. How could the bodyguards who lost money let him go? After he lost all the money he had won in the past to others, even with Qi Jin's reminder, the red-eyed Xiao Jian simply couldn't listen. He even said that he would get angry with anyone who didn't allow him to gamble. This kind of gambling behavior was the favorite of all gamblers. The gambling continued until dawn. Under the morning light, Xiao Jian walked to the front of the carriage, somewhat tired. In the distant shadows, a group of bodyguards and some shop assistants who participated in the gambling secretly poked their heads out. They were afraid of the otherworldly Xiao Hua, and even more afraid of Yuan Ye, who was more ferocious than a beast. However, they couldn't let go of the vitality stones that Xiao Jian lost to them. Losing a game wasn't scary. What was scary was, the more you bet, the more you lose, and the more you lose, the more you gamble. On the 3rd night, no one came to wake Xiao Jian up. However, as he looked at the bustling scene around the bonfire and heard the bets being placed, Xiao Jian felt as if there was a pair of small hands clutching at his heart, making it impossible for him to fall asleep and calm his heart. Finally, Xiao Jian resolutely walked to the side of the bonfire. Looking at Xiao Jian's long shadow in the bonfire, Xiao Hua seemed to have understood something. Xiao Hua felt that he understood, But in reality, what he understood was still too little. When the moon was high in the sky, Xiao Jian came back and took away the last portion of the vitality stones. However, Xiao Jian didn't come back to rest. He followed his own vitality stones to the bonfire. This time, Xiao Jian didn't stay for long. Soon, the bonfire was abnormally noisy. Xiao Jian staggered back. Although the darkness of the night was a very good layer of protection, Xiao Hua could clearly see that Xiao Jian's face was bruised and swollen. When Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, he already understood everything. Xiao Jian actually began to cheat after losing all his primeval stones. If you want to cheat, you can cheat, but you were discovered by others. If it wasn't for Xiao Hua and Yuanya behind Xiao Jian, this guy would have been beaten to a pulp by a group of bodyguards. Perhaps one could see true feelings in difficult days, but one's true nature would never be seen. Perhaps only when one was comfortable and relaxed could one see one's true nature. How many loving couples could help each other when they were in poverty, but when they were rich, they couldn't help each other? This was what people often said, being able to share hardships but not happiness. When Xiao Jian didn't have money, he could bring Yuanya along. No matter if it was divination or running a training hall, he was able to keep his loneliness. However, when he was comfortable and his life was secure, the bad side in his heart immediately revealed itself. No matter how much he pretended, it couldn't hide it. The morning wind blew, blowing away the darkness of the night. Everyone stood up in high spirits, their faces filled with smiles as they faced a new day. That's right, how could a few boxes full of vitality stones be compared to ordinary gold and silver? But it was Xiao Jian who lost it all. Everyone who received vitality stones was abnormally happy. This was something that they couldn't even dream of. Even if they went home now, in this lifetime, no, several lifetimes, they wouldn't be short of money. This world was like this, there was only so much happiness. If you were happy, others wouldn't be happy. If you weren't happy, others would take away your happiness. Xiao Jian was like this. Others completely robbed him of his happiness, leaving him with only bitterness. Other than frowning, he was listless. Yesterday at dusk, he still had wealth comparable to a rich man. Today at dawn, he had become a pauper, with nothing left. However, contrary to the expectations of Xiao Hua, who was coldly watching from the side, after the carriages had left for half an hour, the dejection on Xiao Jian's face had already disappeared. It was as if he didn't go to the bonfire gambling house, and even more so, as if he didn't receive any vitality stones at all. Hee, how interesting. Xiao Hua looked at Xiao Jian, who was in a good mood. He really didn't understand. He was very clear about the value of those spirit stones. If he lost those spirit stones, Xiao Hua would definitely not forgive himself, and would definitely be heartbroken. Oh, there are interesting things every year, but it seems like there are a lot of them this year. Xiao Hua's gaze had just moved away from Xiao Jian, and immediately looked at a few tall mountains in the distance. Those tall mountains surrounded the main road, and it was unknown when the main road under their feet started to narrow. The weeds on the side of the road were also lush. It was as if it was a barren place. Perhaps the huge gambling house from before made these escorts' sense of smell become dull. Only when they saw the tall mountains did they become alert, and immediately sent a few escorts to rush into the mountains to investigate. Including the carriages that joined the carriages later, there were already dozens of carriages in the Sunhai Trading Company. There were also close to 40 escorts from different escort companies. They waited for a moment, but still didn't see any signal and couldn't help but feel anxious. At this moment, Qi Jin came again. The pitiful Qi Jin was now knocked out by Xiao Jian's vitality stones. Those were immortal stones. Qi Jin, who had traveled extensively, had long heard of it. His own home also had a lot of immortal stones, but seeing Xiao Jian lose more immortal stones than he had collected in his lifetime, he really didn't dare to put Xiao Jian, who had taken his money, together with the current Xiao Jian. He had already regarded Xiao Jian as an otherworldly expert. Even though this expert had been beaten up by many escorts, he only regarded this otherworldly expert as someone who was playing in the mortal world. Seeing Xiao Jian impatiently waving his hand, and then looking at Xiao Hua, who was sitting cross-legged on a horse with his eyes closed, Qi Jin confidently returned to the carriages. At this moment, the escorts who entered the mountains also sent a signal that it was safe. Chapter 3241. Dozens of carriages started moving again. Although the escorts were nervous, they still urged their horses forward. This was the only way to enter the capital of the Jiasa kingdom. Beyond these mountains was a sprawling forest filled with wild beasts. There was no way to go. The only thing they prayed for was that the mountain bandits would not come down the mountain to rob them. They were either drunk, had robbed enough, or had seen that there were enough escorts in their carriages. Unfortunately, these escorts' luck had already been used up a few days ago when they gambled with Xiao Jian. They had only been on the mountain path for about 2 hours when their extreme joy turned to sorrow. After a series of loud gongs, hundreds of bandits dressed in different outfits swarmed out from the side of the mountain ridge where the carriages were located, surrounding the carriages like dumplings. Even if the group of escorts wanted to escape, there was no way for them to do so. Haha. While everyone's expression changed, Xiao Jian was covering his mouth and laughing. That's right, he had nothing on him now. His primordial stones had long been used up. He was the only one who wasn't afraid of the mountain bandits. Then a loud roar came from the front left of the carriages. A yellow horse turned out from the mountain ridge. The man on the horse was 20 feet tall. He held a long saber in his hand and shouted, "This road is opened by me." Then, there was another loud roar that was even louder than before. A bull-like mount came out from the back of the carriage. There was also a valiant person sitting on it, and he shouted with a ferocious face, "This tree was planted by me." Soon after, the man stopped talking again. Only some of the bandits on the left were beating their gongs with all their might. When the sound of the gongs faded away, 2 more burly bandits appeared from the front and the right of the caravan. They shouted, "If you want to pass through here, you have to pay the toll." That was the best song of all time. Strange, what's going on? Xiao Hua was puzzled. He looked around and asked in a low voice, "Taoist?" The quick-witted Lu Yi had already opened his eyes. He wasn't nervous at all. He smiled and said, "These 4 mountain bandits belong to 4 different strongholds." They said 4 sentences at the same time, which means that the 4 of them will attack together today. I think they found out about the bet a few days ago and attracted the attention of the 4 strongholds at the same time. Normally, they would take turns and only come out when it's the turn of the village. Well, that's the only way. Xiao Hua came to a realization. He had clearly killed all the birds that were sending messages, and he hadn't seen any suspicious birds flying over these past few days. How could these bandits know the exact amount of treasures in these carriages? Perhaps this was the only explanation. However, what Xiao Hua didn't know was that although he was cautious, he still made a mistake. Among the information that the birds brought, in addition to the information about the trading company, there was also information about Xiao Hua and the others' Taoist identities, and also a warning to the bandits not to make a move. However, since Xiao Hua had killed these birds, the mountain bandits naturally wouldn't be able to find out about the warning. Naturally, they would come out to intercept him, especially with the existence of Xiao Jian, the Taoist master. Even if these bandits knew about this, would they let go of this great opportunity to make a fortune? Since Lu Yi knew about it, the other escorts would also know about it. Some of the escorts had already urged their horses forward to collude with the bandits. Xiao Hua put away his doubts and released his divine sense. He watched with interest as the righteous and evil sides discussed over there. This familiar scene made him believe even more firmly that his original home was in the hidden Immortal continent. He was being chased by 2 nascent soul experts, but unexpectedly he profited from a disaster and returned to his homeland. The collusion only lasted for a short moment before both sides broke down. It wasn't that the bandits wanted too much, it was that the escorts and the trading company wanted to give too little. Immediately, the sounds of fighting rang out. Under the escort of the escorts, the workers of the carriages risked their lives to break out of the encirclement. The bandits from all directions also raised their weapons and charged forward. When both sides came into contact, casualties immediately appeared. Although there were many bandits, the majority of them weren't skilled in martial arts. Although there were few escorts, they were all experts. Most of the miserable screams came from the mouths of the bandits. The escorts and escorts were rarely injured. Just like this, the carriages once again charged forward for a distance of several dozen zhang. Xiao Hua and the others were also very depressed. At first, Yuanya followed behind the carriages. Later, the bandits chased from behind. When Yuanya prepared to meet the enemy, those bandits actually let go of the worn-out carriages in the carriages. They didn't even look at Xiao Hua and the others. They directly passed by and challenged the escorts guarding the carriages. Xiao Hua looked at these ant-like bandits and didn't know how to deal with them. He was a nascent soul cultivator. Although he could casually attack and these several hundred bandits wouldn't be able to leave their lives behind, could he do it? Could he make the lightning from the 9 heavens fall on the heads of these bandits who didn't have any magic power? Even if these bandits' steel blades were once stained with blood. Immortal Elder! Immortal Elder! In the distance, a faint shout sounded. When it entered Xiao Hua's ears, it was Qi Jin's cry for help. Xiao Hua glanced at Xiao Jian, who seemed to be rejoicing in other people's misfortune, and didn't seem to have any reaction to this cry for help. Xiao Hua instructed, "Ya, go, help Elder Qi." Yes, Yuanya had long wanted to move. Now that he heard Xiao Hua, he immediately jumped up from the carriage. "Take the weapon." Xiao Hua waved his hand and threw the magic wand to Yuanya. With the magic wand in his hand, Yuanya was like a tiger with wings. He leaped into the air among the bandits. Every shadow of the wand would break the bones of the bandits. He was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. He was invincible and was about to reach Qi Jin. "You brat." At this time, on the mountain ridge to the right of the carriage, a fat monk holding a crescent moon spade roared. He urged his donkey-like mount to rush down the mountain ridge. The monk's chest was bare. His 2-inch-long black hair danced in the mountain wind. When he waved the crescent moon spade, it made a woo-woo sound like a ghost's cry. The donkey was even more strange. When it wagged its tail, it was actually twice as fast as a horse. It rushed down the mountain ridge as if it was flat ground. In a few breaths, it had already arrived in front of Yuanya. "Have a taste of my staff." The fat monk roared again. With a woo sound, the crescent moon spade smashed down with earth-shattering force. Clang! Yuanya did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly waved his magic wand to meet the attack. With a deafening sound, the fat monk and the donkey were stopped and almost moved back half a foot. Yuanya was shaken off the mountain path. His whole body somersaulted a few times in the air, but he could not dissipate the huge force. After landing on the ground, he was pushed back several feet before he could stabilize himself. Looking at the area between Yuanya's thumb and index finger, there was a faint trace of blood. The area between his thumb and index finger was actually split by this attack. Awesome! Yuanya's eyes flashed with a fanatical expression. His legs moved, and with a trembling hand, he waved the magic wand and rushed toward the fat monk. Haha! The fat monk also laughed and urged the donkey to fight with Yuanya. The fat monk was also very good. The crescent moon spade flew up and down. It was a match for Yuanya. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, there was no clear winner. However, Xiao Hua could see that Yuanya did not have many moves, but each of his moves was dangerous, forcing the fat monk to be tired. Coupled with the weight of the magic wand, Yuanya gradually gained the upper hand. Although the fat monk's moves were very tight, his strength was slightly inferior to Yuanya's. He also did not have Yuanya's fearless fierceness. Soon he was at a disadvantage. He might be fine for now, but after a long time, he would definitely be defeated. Fake monk. You also have a day like this. The fierce man who had been standing at the back of the caravan on his bull-like mount laughed loudly. He raised the steel spear in his hand and shouted, "Second brother Ji, if you don't help me, that cheap sister of yours will be a widow." The fat monk was finally able to catch his breath under the shadow of Yuanya's staff and shouted loudly. Just as the fat monk finished speaking, the sound of a staff whistling interrupted the fat monk's shout. "This old man is coming." The fierce man called Second Brother Ji urged the old bull under him. The bull's hooves actually emitted a faint smoke, and it rushed toward Yuanya. Xiao Hua sneered. Just as he was about to make a move, he heard the sound of hurried horse hooves in the distance. A clear and slightly childish voice sounded. "Bold mountain bandit, you actually dare to do such a wicked thing in broad daylight. Eat my sword." Not only was Xiao Hua shocked, even second brother Ji, who was about to attack Yuanya, turned around to look. Dozens of feet away, there was a large green horse. On the horse, there was a scholar who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. This scholar was wearing a green scholar's robe. His thin lips were tightly shut, and he held a 3-foot-long green sword in his hand. Under his sword-like eyebrows, his bright eyes flashed with hatred. Although the green horse's back was as bumpy as waves, the scholar stood steadily on the horse's back. When he got a little closer, the scholar's figure jumped from the horse's back. Using the horse's momentum, he rushed into the air and pierced towards second brother Ji like a wild goose. "Still wet behind the ears, little brat. You don't even dare to tell me your name, and you actually dare to be so serious with your grandfather." Second brother Ji saw that the sword light was like a star, sweeping through the air and piercing toward him. He couldn't help but sneer. Pointing his spear in the air, he roared and turned around to meet the scholar flying toward him. Clang, clang, clang. The scholar's robe fluttered in the air. The sword light was like a floating frost, and the steel spear was like a horned plum blossom in the flying frost. The moment the scholar and the bandit met face to face, they immediately exchanged several moves. The scholar's figure was forced to dodge in the air by the bandit. After borrowing the force of the attack several times, he finally had no choice but to land on the side of the mountain ridge. Where did this scholar come from? Second brother Ji seemed to be somewhat afraid of this scholar. He shook the steel spear in his hand and coldly said, "Which academy are you from? You have no business here, so you should leave early. You are not my opponent." Haha, in broad daylight, when is there a place in the hidden immortal continent where a thief can teach a scholar a lesson? The scholar waved his green sword, and a green light flashed. He coldly looked at second brother Ji and loudly said, "I am not willing to tell you my name because you thieves don't deserve to hear my name. If you hear my name, it will be an insult to me for no reason." Chapter 3242. "Ha, ignorant child." Second brother Ji laughs again, his eyes flashing with an ominous glint. "Don't you think about it, I and the others have been here for several years. How many people more powerful than you have yet to make a move? How could a child like you know about this?" I don't know about the actions of others. I only know that the people of the world care about the world's affairs. We wanderers naturally have to care about the world's injustice, get rid of the world's evil deeds." The scholar is not afraid at all. He coldly snorts and says righteously, "I boast that I am not good at learning, but I read books, practice etiquette, cultivate righteousness, and hold a 3-foot-long sword, so I should move forward and get rid of the world's evil deeds. Although I can't do what the ancient proverb says, but if a bandit soldier commits an evil deed, I will kill him. If a bandit general commits an evil deed, I will also kill him. If we can't get rid of evil, what joy do we have in life? Laughing proudly in the world, getting rid of the universe, what fear do we have in death?" Good. Xiao Hua suddenly stood up from the carriage. This scholar's few words had instantly enlightened Xiao Hua. His previous hesitation had all disappeared. He almost wanted to clap his hands and exclaim in admiration, "Since you want to die, I will let you die. Killing a nameless scholar like you who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, I don't believe that the academy can find my mountain stronghold." Second brother Ji is furious. A man of character will not change his name. "I am the wanderer Yu Zhongquan." The scholar's eyes flash with determination. He knows that this battle points to disaster, so he clenches his teeth and says word by word. When the scholar's name enters his ears, Xiao Hua's figure sways, and he almost falls down from the carriage. "Yu Zhongquan?" Xiao Hua is dumbfounded, a bitter face, and a desolate call immediately flashes in his mind. "Yu Zhongquan wanderer, you? Where are you?" This is the end of the tragic love story of Little Cabbage in front of Tianmen Mountain, on the bank of the cold river. and also the last words of the malicious spirit Huang Yi before he fell into the cycle of reincarnation. Xiaohua didn't expect that this story would actually appear in the hidden immortal continent. This Yu Zhongquan is it that Yu Zhongquan? Xiaohua looked in that direction, inwardly pondering, is it the ranger Yu Zhongquan that Huang Yi mentioned? See no indecent, hear no indecent, speak no indecent, move no indecent? However, since his name is Yu Zhongquan and he is a ranger, how can I just stand by and watch? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes as the green light between his brows flourished. Ripples instantly appeared in the air as tens of thousands of lightning bolts began to move, but just as Xiaohua was about to use the thunderclap lightning flash technique, his heart stirred. With a wave of his hand, a centipede that was several feet long and as thick as a fist flew out from the void. Right now, the Herculean centipede was completely different from before. On the black shell, there were some strange runes. These runes flashed with a faint black and gold light as the God Power centipede flew. The God Power centipede didn't have many legs before, but now, they were even longer. Thick black smoke was coming out of each leg. The smoke supported the God Power centipede as it floated in the air. Looking at the two most eye-catching sword-like antennae on its head, the cold light had long disappeared. At the sharp ends of the antennae, curved runes spread all over the antennae and landed on the top of the Herculean centipede's head. At that place, a faint golden rune formed into a strange rune that looked like a tadpole. Go! Xiaohua looked at the Herculean centipede and indifferently waved his hand. He wasn't afraid that the Herculean centipede wouldn't understand his meaning. Sure enough, as Xiaohua waved his hand, a gust of wind blew as the Herculean centipede urged the black smoke to charge at Second Brother Ji. Second Brother Ji was also very powerful. He originally wanted to use his steel spear to kill Yu Zhongquan, but when he heard the wind, he immediately turned around. Seeing the Herculean centipede in the black cloud, he frowned and patted Yellow Ox. He pointed his steel spear at the sky and shouted, "Which immortal friend from the Black Cloud Ridge is here?" Unfortunately, the Herculean centipede didn't talk to him at all. The black cloud was activated, and the air within a few feet was condensed into a beam. As the Herculean centipede attacked Second Brother Ji felt like he was suffocating. Ah! Second Brother Ji was shocked. He tried his best to use his steel spear to stab the Herculean centipede. Crack! The steel spear touched the centipede's feeler. The tip of the spear slid slightly and was unable to exert any force. Moreover, an inhuman force came from the shaft of the spear, causing the spear to be sent flying. Second Brother Ji was scared witless. He immediately wanted to retreat. However, before he could think of a second idea, he saw another black smoke streaking across the sky. The Herculean centipede's antennae easily split Second Brother Ji and his mount in half. A gust of blood instantly rushed into the air. Seeing Second Brother Ji abandon him to deal with the Herculean centipede, Yu Zhongquan was a bit embarrassed and angry. However, before he could fly forward again, Second Brother Ji, who was extremely powerful in his eyes, was killed by the Herculean centipede in a flash. Yu Zhongquan couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Immediately after, a cold thing swept past his body, making Yu Zhongquan's hair stand on end. He immediately raised his Qingfeng sword and prepared to be on guard. However, before he could raise his Qingfeng sword, the Herculean centipede actually flew up again. It rode the black cloud and rushed in another direction. It seemed that its target was another bandit general. Who is this? Yu Zhongquan let out a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to look around, a young man who wasn't much older than him suddenly appeared in front of him. He was so scared that he almost screamed. This young man stood in front of Yu Zhongquan and didn't say anything. He only looked at Yu Zhongquan from head to toe. Under his curious gaze, he almost stretched out his hand and tore Yu Zhongquan apart to take a look. Sensing this malicious gaze, the goosebumps that had just appeared on Yu Zhongquan's skin again. He hurriedly shrunk his neck and raised the Qingfeng sword. As if to boost his courage, he anxiously asked, "You? Or you?" This person was naturally Xiaohua. Xiaohua looked at Yu Zhongquan with a smile, as if he was looking at something very interesting. When he heard Yu Zhongquan's question, he smiled and said, "Don't ask this Xiao first. This Xiao will ask you, you are Yu Zhongquan. How old are you? Where do you live? Are you married? Do you have a wife named Huang Yi? Where did you come from and where do you want to go?" Yu Zhongquan was stupefied. He looked at Xiao Hua with extreme disbelief. He was simply drowned by Xiao Hua's questions. After a while, he finally reacted and said in a flustered and exasperated manner, "Is your brain damaged?" As he spoke, Yu Zhongquan walked past Xiao Hua in a few steps. He wanted to rush over and kill the mountain bandit, but strangely, Xiao Hua smiled and appeared in front of Yu Zhongquan like a ghost. He said with a smile, "Yu Zhongquan, if this Xiao's brain is damaged, then I'm afraid there isn't anyone in this world with a good brain. How about this? This Xiao sees that you are a talented person and wants to matchmake you. Tell me, what kind of girl do you like? How about this Xiao introduce a little cabbage to you?" "Get out of the way." Yu Zhongquan's face was completely red. He pointed his Qingfeng sword at Xiao Hua's nose and said, "This one knows that you are not a mountain bandit, so this one will not sacrifice you to my sword. But if you continue to slander this one and continue to nag like this, don't blame this one for being impolite. AI, you really don't know what's good for you." Xiao Hua shrugged and retreated a few steps. He said helplessly, "This Xiao is the moon elder of the heavens. I fell into the mortal world and wanted to matchmake you a 10,000-year red string. If you are the moon elder, then this one is the sword immortal." Yu Zhongquan unhappily walked a few steps forward. As he spoke, his Qingfeng sword danced and rushed towards a mountain bandit. "Go wherever it's cool." All right. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said with a smile, "The sky is cool. This Xiao will go to the sky and stay there." As he spoke, Xiao Hua activated his flying talisman and flew into the air. He sat there with interest. You can go wherever you want. What does it have to do with this one? Who would have thought that Yu Zhongquan would completely ignore him? His Qingfeng sword lifted the bandit's padao and stabbed towards the bandit's throat. The bandit's padao flashed. He originally wanted to defend and counterattack, but suddenly, panic flashed across the bandit's face. He actually did not dare to fight against Yu Zhongquan's Qingfeng sword and wanted to dodge. This bandit's underling was originally not Yu Zhongquan's opponent. If he fought with his life on the line, he might have been able to escape with his life. But now that he was so afraid, he only wanted to dodge. Naturally, after a few moves, his throat was stabbed by Yu Zhongquan and he died on the ground. Yu Zhongquan sneered. He ignored the blood on the tip of his sword and the bandit's eyes that were still open on the ground. He jumped up again and chased after another bandit. However, soon after, Yu Zhongquan was extremely puzzled as he discovered that he was really invincible. Not only did the sword light hit him, all the underlings were scared witless. Even before he could catch up, those bandits who saw his shadow also fled. This made him really excited. With righteousness in the chest, evil ghosts will be easily defeated. With righteousness in mind, one will fight 100 battles without hesitation. Yu Zhongquan could not help but roar towards the sky. He shouted with extreme joy, "Come, come, come, who dares to fight 300 rounds with me?" At this moment, Yu Zhongquan had already reached the side of the carriages. The originally terrified shop assistant's face was now filled with ecstasy. He welcomed Yu Zhongquan and shouted, "Thank you, Immortal Master, for your kindness. You're welcome, you're welcome." Yu Zhongquan was in high spirits. The Qingfeng sword in his hand trembled slightly as he responded proudly. But suddenly, he seemed to have realized something. "What? Immortal Master?" Yu Zhongquan suddenly turned around and saw Xiao Hua standing with his hands clasped behind his back. He stood there with a smile, and there was an indescribable wretchedness in his eyes. Yes, the ranger Yu Zhongquan actually understood wretchedness in the eyes of the so-called Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva. "You really are Immortal Master?" Yu Zhongquan's left hand trembled as he raised it. He pointed at Xiao Hua and asked in shock. When Yu Zhongquan finished speaking, he felt that it was inappropriate. He hurriedly withdrew his hand and hid it behind his back. This Xiao is Immortal Master? Xiao Hua said with a smile, didn't I just tell you? This Xiao is the Moon Elder in the sky. Chapter 3243. Young Master, Young Master? Just as Xiao Hua and Yu Zhongquan were talking, there was a rush of horse hooves in the distance. An old man with white hair and beard was also riding a big cyan horse. He rushed over without a care for his life. Although the old man's face was full of fear, the concern in his eyes was obvious. Seeing that the old man was about to catch up, Yu Zhongquan's face showed a trace of unnaturalness. He hurriedly shouted, "Seventh uncle, I'm fine." Hearing Yu Zhongquan's impatient answer, the old man's eyes showed a trace of comfort. Then he shouted behind him, "You too? Hurry up and save the young master. If anything happens to the young master, this old man will peel your skin and pull out your tendons." Behind the old man, there were also 2 large green horses. Riding on the horses were 2 men dressed in tight clothes. These 2 men held the same green sword as Yu Zhongquan. Although these 2 men urged their horses with all their might, their horses were clearly not as spirited as the old man's horse. Although the 2 men said yes, they were still unable to surpass the old man. "You two don't want to live anymore?" Seventh uncle was furious. He was respectful to Yu Zhongquan, but he was not polite to these 2 family guards. "Seventh uncle." The guard on the left smiled bitterly, "You are chasing the young master without a care for your life. This little one is also worried about the young master, but you gave the most handsome Jue Feng to the young master. This little one can't catch up." "That's right. Seventh uncle." The guard on the right whispered, "Didn't you see that there is an immortal next to the young master? With that old man, wouldn't he be 100 times more useful than us?" "Fart, fart." Seventh uncle shouted, "Taoists are all deceiving things. Even if that person has some skills, how can he be more assured than our Yu family? If you two don't go and protect him, this old man will break your legs." The 2 family guards smiled bitterly and hurriedly urged their cyan horses. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, the horses were not enough. In the end, they only arrived with Seventh uncle. At this moment, Yu Zhongquan was no longer in high spirits like before. He was somewhat listless as he drooped his head and stood beside Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had already landed, but he could clearly see that it wasn't because of him, but because of the old man who hadn't arrived yet. Sure enough, when the old man arrived before them, he didn't even bother to greet them. Instead, he immediately leaped to Yu Zhongquan's side and ran his hands all over Yu Zhongquan's body to make sure that he wasn't missing an arm or a leg. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief and said earnestly, "Little young master, you are the precious treasure of our Yu clan, a piece of meat in our old ancestors' heart. Once you go out?" "Seventh uncle." Yu Zhongquan's face turned red. He stole a glance at Xiao Hua, who was still standing in the air, and complained, "There's a senior expert here. You should speak less." "Sigh, young master, it's not that this old servant wants to criticize you. Who would have thought that once Yu Zhongquan spoke, Seventh uncle would become even more long-winded. This old servant has eaten more salt than you have eaten rice. This old servant has walked more bridges than you have walked on roads. What kind of swindler has this old servant not seen? In the past, there were many Taoist priests who came to our Yu clan to eat and drink. Which one of them didn't bow to this old servant when they saw him? This old servant is very clear about their tricks. You sneaked out without telling your family. If this old servant hadn't discovered you early." "Seventh uncle." Yu Zhongquan's face turned completely green. His deception of claiming to be a ranger was inadvertently exposed by Seventh uncle. Yu Zhongquan's face suddenly disappeared. He didn't even have the courage to look at Xiao Hua. He quickly walked towards his cyan horse. "Little young master, hee little young master." The 2 family guards hurriedly stood in front of Yu Zhongquan and pleaded, "If you return home, we will serve you on your horse. If you don't return to see your wife, we won't dare." Scram. Hearing his wife, Yu Zhongquan's face turned completely black. He angrily said, "This Shui Feng is this young master's mount. You dare not let this young master get on his horse?" "Seventh uncle, seventh uncle? A fat family guard anxiously said, if little young master gets on Jure Feng, we won't be able to catch up. Cough cough. Seventh uncle coughed twice. He glanced at Xiao Hua beside him and lightly said, this Taoist priest, this is my Yu clan's private matter. It seems you can't stay here and watch, right? Although you're not a Confucian cultivator and don't know about seeing and hearing indecent things, there's no need for you to stay here and watch the show, right? Haha, indeed, indeed. Xiao Hua looked at Yu Zhongquan with interest. It seemed the difference between what he thought and Yu Zhongquan was too far. He laughed several times and flew away. Humph, swindler. Seventh uncle glanced at Xiao Hua and then turned to Yu Zhongquan and said, little young master, if you want to hide for a few days, we can just treat it as playing. Xiao Hua, who had been reprimanded as a swindler, was flying in the air. Everywhere he looked, there were bandits fleeing in a sorry state. Behind these bandits, there were dozens of bodyguards shouting and chasing after them. They seemed to be extremely happy. Above these bandits, the god power centipede was riding a black cloud. From time to time, it would swoop down. If it wasn't a flash of black light cutting the bandits into pieces, it would be like a black arrow piercing through the bandits' bodies. Wherever the black cloud went, it was truly invincible. No one dared to fight it. Hee hee. Xiao Hua proudly looked at the god power centipede's devastation. He secretly said, with this Xiao's identity, I naturally can't lower myself to the same level as these bandits. But this fake ranger who ran away from home said it well. If the bandits commit evil deeds, I will kill them. If the bandits commit evil deeds, I will also kill them. Although these bandits can't take a single blow from this Xiao, how can I easily let them off with their evil deeds? This god power centipede, and little black and little yellow can help this Xiao. Anyway, there are a lot of evil spirits in this hidden immortal continent. Adding a few more of them won't make a difference. At this time, 3 of the 4 strongholds leaders had already been killed by the god power centipede. The last one was still fighting with Yuanya. However, looking at the panic on the fake monk's face and his scattered moves, it was likely that his mind had already collapsed. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated by Yuanya. The managers of the several companies, including Qi Jin, had already ordered the workers to tidy up the carriages and check the goods. They were ready to wait for the escorts to come back. As for Xiao Jian, his eyes followed the god power centipede as it flew up and down. He stared at it without blinking. It seemed that he was both confused and envious. Woo! With a sharp cry, the god power centipede seemed to have lost its target. It turned a few times in the air and rushed to the fat monk's head. The fat monk's face immediately turned pale. Taking advantage of this moment, Yuanya rushed close to the fat monk. He waved his magic wand and hit the fat monk's shoulder. Bang! With a muffled sound, the fat monk screamed miserably. Under this attack, the fat monk's shoulder bone was broken. He no longer had the strength to lift the weapon in his hand. The fat monk hurriedly shook the donkey and wanted to escape with the donkey. Where are you going? Yuanya roared. He jumped up and waved his magic wand at the fat monk's back. The fat monk was about to be killed by Yuanya. Piff! The sound of a fart as loud as spring thunder came from the donkey's tail. An incomparably foul smell mixed with black gas rushed towards Yuanya. Even the donkey's tail was like an iron rod that struck towards Yuanya's chest. Bang! Yuanya was scared out of his wits. He only had time to use his magic wand to block the donkey's tail. He himself fell to the ground with a fart that he had never heard before. His face turned black and green. Damn it, they are all weirdos. Xiao Hua was unable to stand steadily in the air again. The incomparably powerful Yuanya was actually knocked out by the fart of the donkey. I wonder what he will think when he wakes up. Ouch, slow down. Since Yuanya was knocked out, the god's powered centipede naturally couldn't stand it. Without waiting for Xiao Hua's orders, it immediately rushed down. The fat monk, who was already weak and numb, couldn't resist the god's powered centipede at all. Xiao Hua still wanted to keep the strange little donkey, but it was already too late. Of course, Yuanya was poisoned by the strange little donkey and not simply fainted. However, in front of Xiao Hua, this little bit of poison was nothing. A detoxification pill was enough to wake Yuanya up. However, contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, Yuanya's face wasn't more interesting than Yu Zhongxuan's face. Instead, it was calm, as if being fainted by the fart of the donkey wasn't an extremely embarrassing thing. Ouch, this old man understands. Yuanya himself grew up in the forest. In his eyes, donkeys. Are there any differences between humans and donkeys? Xiaohua, who was watching the show, suddenly slapped his forehead and came to a realization. Since the 4 bandit generals were killed, the escorts who stayed behind to guard the carriages immediately sent out a signal. The escorts who were chasing after the bandits immediately gave up on their targets and returned. Their mission was to protect the carriages of the trading company, not to kill the bandits. Killing bandits was the job of the soldiers. The king of Jiasa country didn't pay them any money. However, all the escorts looked at the god's powered centipede with fear when they returned. In this battle, the one who deserved the most credit was naturally the god's powered centipede. The 4 bandit generals were beheaded, and more than 10 powerful bandits were killed by the god's powered centipede. If it weren't for the god's powered centipede, the escorts who represented justice wouldn't have been able to obtain victory. The escorts, who were the first to be dissatisfied with Xiaohua and then disdainful of Xiao Jian and the others, suddenly discovered their own shallowness. Their hearts filled with fear and anxiety, they each began to make their own plans. As soon as they returned to the side of the carriage, they began to discuss. Not long after, Qi Jin was pushed out by the crowd. He walked in front of Xiaohua with a smile on his face. At this moment, Xiaohua had just put the god's powered centipede into his space. He looked at Qi Jin with some confusion. "Senior Immortal," Qi Jin said cautiously. Although Senior Immortal disdained to make a move, Senior Immortal's spirit pet was very brave. It saved our trading company from the bandits. We just discussed that we are willing to pay half of the celestial stones we won from Senior Immortal's disciple. Chapter 3244. No need. Xiaohua smiled faintly. This old man has no disciple. The evil in this world must be dealt with by the righteous people. This old man killed these bandits because of this old man's actions. There's no reason for me to ask you for a reward. Yes. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't accept it, Qi Jin was a bit embarrassed. He knew that Xiaohua didn't want to interfere with their matters with Xiao Jian, so he answered while walking to Xiao Jian's side. As for how Xiao Jian would respond, Xiaohua didn't care. Because at this time, the so-called ranger Yu Zhongquan seemed to have reached some agreement with the Yu family's 7th uncle. Under the 7th uncle's lead, he came to Xiaohua. 7th uncle cupped his hands and said, "This old man is Yi Feng country's Yu family's servant, Yu Qi. Greetings to Taoist Xiao. From what my family's young master said, it was you who saved him. This old man was a bit slow in treating you. May I know where your Taoist temple is? This old man will report this matter to my family's head and ask him to send people to your Taoist temple to rebuild the Taoist temple and reconstruct the Taoist's golden body." Seeing 7th uncle flaunting his seniority and hearing 7th uncle call himself old man, Xiaohua smiled and returned the greeting. "Old man is too polite. This Xiao doesn't deserve such a great reward. Moreover, this Xiao is also a wild crane with no place to stay. This Xiao appreciates old man's kindness." "How can that be?" 7th uncle didn't give up. He shook his head and said, "My Yu family is a great scholarly family. My ancestors have passed down poems and books. Everyone in Yi Feng country knows that my Yu family rules with etiquette. If you don't repay such a great favor, how can my Yu family face the world?" Damn it. Xiaohua saw that every word of 7th uncle's was a great scholarly family. Even if he didn't ask for repayment, he would tarnish the Yu family's reputation. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart. However, he waved his hand and said, "Old man's words are wrong." 7th uncle was surprised and asked curiously, "What advice does Taoist have?" "Although this Xiao isn't a scholarly cultivator, I admire the righteous spirit of scholarly cultivators. Just a few moments ago, the young master of the noble clan was facing hundreds of bandits and the leader of the bandits whom he could not resist at all. The young master said, "Read books, practice etiquette, cultivate righteousness, and hold a 3-foot sword. Then, we should move forward courageously and sweep away all evil in the world." Such words are like divine thunder from the 9 heavens that awaken this Xiao. He is only a scholar in his teens, but he can rely on the righteous spirit to reach the realm of, even if there are tens of thousands of people, I will still go forward. Isn't that the ranger in this Xiao's heart? Wasn't he one of the rare and magnificent men in the world? This Xiao is only fighting the enemy together with him, so what help is there? Old Sir is worried about the face of the scholarly cultivator clans, but I still have to worry about the face of my Dao sect. In the future, Old Sir must not mention this matter again. Xiao Hua's words made 7th Uncle's face glow. He naturally didn't know about Yu Zhongquan's performance. Although he looked down on the declining Dao sect and looked down on Xiao Hua did save Yu Zhongquan after all. At this time, he even praised Yu Zhongquan in such a lofty manner. His heart was already blooming with joy. He couldn't even close his mouth as he said with a smile, "Daoist Xiao is really exaggerating. Little Gongzi is still young and hasn't learned the true meaning of our Confucian cultivation. This is merely what I heard eldest Gongzi and my master often talk about." Words can be imitated, but righteous spirit is irreplaceable. Xiao Hua disagreed. Facing the leader of the bandits who could easily kill him, your noble young master stepped forward bravely. This is definitely not some simple matter of hearing and seeing. It's all because your sect has taught your son well. Alas. 7th Uncle didn't expect Xiao Hua to actually hold Confucian cultivators and his Yu family in such high esteem. It seemed that Xiao Hua didn't have any barrier between Dao sect and Confucian cultivators. He was very happy in his heart and looked at Xiao Hua a lot more pleasing to the eye. When he heard Xiao Hua's last words, he couldn't help but sigh. Daoist Xiao may not know, but this old man has watched little Gongzi grow up. Think of the little baby who peed on this old man's neck when he was young. 7th Uncle? Yu Zhongquan's face was as red as a red cloth. He threatened, "If you keep talking, I'll leave." "Hey, I won't say. 7th Uncle was full of smiles, as if he had forgotten his previous vigilance. He asked Xiao Hua, "Where is Daoist Xiao going? If you have time, how about we go together?" He. Xiao Hua laughed and replied, "This Xiao wants to go to Bronze Pillar State, but I don't know if I'm going the same way as you." Before 7th Uncle could speak, Yunya walked back and handed over the cleaned magic wand to Xiao Hua. He said respectfully, "Thank you for the weapon, Daoist Xiao." And Xiao Hua took it and put it into his space. He looked at Yu Zhongquan and smiled. "Yunya, this is Yu Zhongquan, the descendant of Yifeng State's great Confucian. You didn't see him when you were fighting just now. He actually dared to fight a bandit leader by himself. His courage is definitely out of the ordinary. I'm Yu Zhongquan. Greetings, fellow Daoist." Yu Zhongquan had already seen Yunya who fought the fat monk. Yuanya's bravery made him admire him. Now that he had the chance, how could he not know how to befriend him? He hurriedly bowed and said, "I'm Yu Zhongquan." Although Yuanya wasn't good with words, hearing Yu Zhongquan's courage, he also looked at him in a new light and hurriedly returned the greeting. However, after the two greeted each other, they didn't know what to say after a few words. The scene was quite awkward. Xiao Hua waved his hand again. "Lu Yi, Yuanya isn't good with words. Come over here. You're both young people. You should get to know each other." "Yes, Daoist priest." Lu Yi didn't dare to move around in the carriage for fear of causing trouble. Now that he heard the call, he hurriedly slipped down from the carriage. Mighty. In front of the carriages, there were already shouts from the escort agency. Obviously, they were about to set off again. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Old sir, please. Young people have their own topics. We have our own matters. How about we chat as we go?" Xiao Hua was very concerned about the matter between Yu Zhongquan and Huang Yi. Naturally, he also looked at the people of the Yu clan in a new light. He really wanted to get to know Yu Zhongquan better. Of the 2 Yu clan guards who didn't announce their names, one accompanied Yu Zhongquan, while the other led Zhui Feng, which Yu Zhongquan was riding before, over and asked 7th Uncle to get on the horse. Seventh uncle lifted his leg and got on the saddle horse. He said to Xiaohua with a smile, "Hee, this old man is already old. I'm 82 years old. Taoist priest Xiao has the ability to retain one's youthful appearance. This old man can't see how old Taoist priest is compared to this old man." Xiaohua was a bit hesitant. After thinking for a bit, he smiled and said, "Old sir's age is really not young. However, old sir's skills are vigorous and not inferior to ordinary people. Even if you say you're 60 years old, this Xiao would still believe it." "Ha," seventh uncle laughed heartily. "This old man only received the clan head's generous gift to practice the clan's secret arts. Although I can't achieve great success and can't sweep away the demons in the region like the little Gongzi and the others, but when it comes to condensing qi and blood, there's no harm in moving nimbly. Otherwise, how could the heavy responsibility of following the little Gongzi fall on this old man's shoulders? Besides, this old man is nothing. My clan's previous clan head was over 100 years old, but he was still able to wield a 3-foot-long sword and kill the Xuanyang water bandits leader. That's what you call amazing." At this point, seventh uncle came to a realization and said with a smile, "That's right. At this point, this old man still hasn't asked for Taoist priest Zhao's name. Taoist priest Xiao also doesn't seem to have mentioned my age." Xiaohua sighed. Looking at seventh uncle's somewhat arrogant smile, he didn't know how to answer. It seemed that the so-called desire to win or lose wasn't only commonly seen in battles and gambling, it was also commonly seen in ordinary speech. It wouldn't wear out because of a person's age. Or perhaps seventh uncle felt that he didn't have Xiaohua's divine abilities and wanted to find a balance in these minor details. Xiaohua just couldn't answer this question. Even he himself didn't know his true age. If he counted from the Dawn Rain Continent's Shanghua Ming, perhaps he was close to 200 years old, right? However, even if Xiaohua said the most reliable and also the shortest age at this time, would seventh uncle believe him? "My surname is Xiao and my given name is Hua." At this point, Xiaohua faintly smiled. "I already don't know how old I am this year. I only know that the last time I went into seclusion was 100 years ago." At this point, Xiaohua suddenly remembered that he didn't know how long it had been since he entered the Eye of the Sea and woke up in front of the river and tide temple several dozen days ago. Seventh uncle stared blankly, then immediately smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "Taoist priest Xiao is truly a deity. This old man admires you." "Ha." Xiaohua also laughed heartily and casually cupped his hands. He knew in his heart that seventh uncle's deity didn't mean that he was a deity in cultivation, but rather a deity who bragged. He didn't mind. Wasn't his true situation what Xiao Jian, this so-called Taoist priest, often bragged about? He also didn't need to explain anything to seventh uncle. The carriages continued to move forward. Lu Yi Yuanya and Yu Zhongquan were chatting at the front. From time to time, some laughter could be heard. Seventh uncle looked at Yu Zhongquan's beaming face and felt happy in his heart. He unconsciously told Xiaohua everything that Yu Zhongquan didn't want to say. The Yu family was a scholarly family of Yifeng country. It could be said that the entire Yifeng country was supported by the Yu family. Even the king of Yifeng country had to bow his head and greet the Yu family. The Yu family had many heirs and many side branches. Yu Zhongquan was the youngest among the main branches. Yu Zhongquan was exceptionally intelligent since childhood. He was familiar with poetry and books at a very young age. When he was a little older, he had thoroughly read the classics of the scholarly families. He would often put forward his own unique views and was doted on by the family head. Furthermore, he was also expected to produce another great grandmaster in the Yu family, or even a literary sage. Unfortunately, Yu Zhongquan's cultivation path was out of everyone's expectations. When he first stepped on the path of refining essence into qi, it was very easy, but when he started cultivating, it was abnormally difficult. Others used a day's effort, but he could only use 10 days to achieve it. The true qi in his chest couldn't be refined and purified. Now, he was already 14 or 15 years old, but he was still in the realm of a scholar. This was still nothing. After all, the Yu family had many scholarly disciples. What kind of situation hadn't they seen before? They also had corresponding secret techniques to deal with it. But what puzzled others the most was Yu Zhongquan's ambition. Yu Zhongquan wanted to be a ranger, not the great grandmaster that the Yu family had in mind. What was a ranger? The ranger that seventh uncle spoke of was very different from what Xiaohua thought. Chapter 3245. What was a ranger? A ranger sounded very awe-inspiring. In the eyes of many people, it was a swordsman who traveled all over the world, upholding justice and helping the weak. Many of the chivalrous stories passed down by word of mouth in the secular world were also related to rangers. Rangers were almost synonymous with justice in people's minds. However, in fact, in the eyes of Confucian cultivators, especially in the eyes of those great Confucian families, rangers were synonymous with debauches. They were people who couldn't cultivate Confucian cultivation techniques and couldn't practice sword qi. They could only rely on their mediocre swordsmanship and wander around, idling around. In the eyes of great Confucian scholars, these people were all poor and destitute, abandoned children who couldn't accomplish anything. In short, they were a group of Confucian cultivators who didn't care for their grandparents and didn't love their uncles. They were a different branch of Confucian cultivators, but in fact, in the eyes of Confucian cultivators, they were just wild foxes. In particular, these rangers didn't care about etiquette, morality, honor, and shame. They were like male dogs in heat, teasing good women everywhere, destroying their chastity, and then patting their hands. They once again wandered around the world. They even said that they were in love with each other, so there was no need to spend all their time together. Rangers are the scum of us Confucian cultivators. Listening to seventh uncle's somewhat teeth-gnashing shout, Xiaohua almost thought that some of seventh uncle's women had an affair with the rangers. However, after listening to seventh uncle's words, he finally understood that it wasn't seventh uncle's personal grudge with the rangers, but a group of great Confucian families who followed the rules and regulations of this free and undisciplined lifestyle. Confucian cultivators are upright cultivators between heaven and earth. Oh, Taoist Xiao, it's not that this old man wants to slander your Taoist school, but Taoist school steals the essence of heaven and earth for their own use, not thinking of giving back to heaven and earth for marriage, which is exactly what we Confucian cultivators despise. The disciples of Confucian cultivators should read the books of the sages, know etiquette, know right and wrong, hold the outline of heaven and earth, and follow the rules of heaven and earth. Use the outline of heaven and earth to rule the world, conduct yourself properly, and don't use the thoughts in your heart to kill. Seventh uncle looked at Xiaohua with some disdain and said, even if you want to eliminate evil and punish evil, you should use the methods of Confucian cultivators to punish, and not use your own evil. Rule by law, rule by law. This is the difference between us Confucians and you Taoists. Hiss. Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. Although he could also be considered a Confucian cultivator, and his Confucian cultivation was even higher than seventh uncle's, this was the first time he had heard words that integrated the principles of heaven and earth into people's daily actions and into the management of a country. Although seventh uncle's words were not without bias, Xiaohua still felt as if he had been enlightened. He had already realized this when he was in the Dawn Rain continent. There weren't any restrictions between the three kingdoms of cultivation. Ordinary cultivators would draw their swords against each other from time to time and kill each other for their treasures. There were countless cases of greed at the sight of wealth. Isn't this just the lack of the Confucian cultivation method that seventh uncle mentioned? This Dharma was like the heavenly Tao of Taoism. All kinds of cultivation were under the heavenly Tao. One could comprehend the heavenly Tao, but one could not provoke the heavenly Tao. The Dharma of Confucianism was the heavenly Tao. If one violated the Dharma, they would be punished by the Dharma. Naturally, the heavenly Tao was far grander than the Dharma. The Dharma was merely a small shadow of the heavenly Tao under the governance of Confucianism. Seeing Xiaohua's expression change, seventh uncle said proudly, although this old man is not good at our Confucian cultivation method, I often read the historical records of our Yu clan's ancestors. From the ancient history, Taoism didn't follow the rules, didn't know etiquette, and didn't establish the Dharma. This was why they lost their own rules. If you say they were annihilated by our immortal and Buddhist sects, it would be better to say they lost their way. They lost their direction of survival under your so-called heavenly Tao. Seeing that seventh uncle was talking nonsense again, Xiaohua smiled and said, "Old sir, some of your words are indeed enlightening and deafening. This Xiao can't deny it. However, if you want to generalize and use Dharma to cover up the annihilation of Taoism, it's not appropriate. No matter if it's Confucianism, Buddhism, or Taoism, they are all cultivation paths between heaven and earth. Although their paths are different, their directions and goals are not necessarily different. Since each of them can exist, they naturally have their own reasons for existing. Old sir, you're pointing out the annihilation of Taoism right now. Your words have evidence, but maybe there are other reasons. You're pointing out the annihilation of Confucianism and Buddhism with similarly conclusive evidence? Nonsense. Seventh uncle felt that Xiaohua was speechless and was acting shamelessly here. He smiled and said, "No matter where it is, Dharma is the epitome of heavenly Tao. Everything must be done under Dharma." As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something. He pointed behind him and said, "Take those bandits from before, for example. Exterminating bandits is an act of the country, the duty of the officers and soldiers. What we need to do is to capture them and send them to the government, not to let you kill them yourself." "Oh, that's right, this old man was talking to you about the ranger. This ranger carries on your Taoism's idea of freedom. He does whatever he wants and doesn't respect Dharma. As the saying goes, a ranger uses martial arts to break the law. A ranger only emphasizes martial arts, not Dharma. He kills as he pleases. How can he enter the hall of elegance?" This. Xiaohua touched his nose and said with a bitter smile, "As far as this Xiao knows, these bandits seem to have some connections with the government. If we send them to the government, it may not be of any use. Even if someone sends them to the government, I'm afraid that they will suffer some kind of retaliation. Moreover, if this Xiao only wants to capture these bandits, there will certainly be some misgivings. The difficulty will also increase. Since they have blood on their hands, why can't this Xiao enforce justice on behalf of heaven? For you, no matter who you are, you're only a human. You're a Taoist. What qualifications do you have to enforce justice on behalf of heaven? What evidence do you have that they have blood on their hands? If you kill them, won't you be the same as them?" Seventh uncle seemed to have been prepared for this and asked several questions in succession. This. Xiaohua rubbed his nose until it was somewhat red. He really didn't know how to answer. As for the government colluding with them, that's just your guess. Even if it's true, it's just the actions of some scum in the government. All the more reason you should hand this matter over to their king and let their king punish them according to the law. Seventh uncle lectured again. When it came to speaking, Xiaohua had always been weak. He didn't understand the ancient records of Confucian cultivators and so on. At this time, he was even more unable to answer. In his opinion, if he wanted to answer, it could only be the words of Buddhism. If I don't enter the cycle of reincarnation, who will enter the cycle of reincarnation? Taking all the sins on oneself, let's see how Confucian cultivators deal with it. It was a pity that Xiaohua wasn't bald. He feared that he wouldn't be able to answer in such a way to convince seventh uncle. At this time, Yu Zhongquan, who had been eavesdropping from the front, faintly said, "Seventh uncle, what should you say about Confucian using literature to violate the law?" When seventh uncle heard this, he was so angry that his beard blew and his eyes widened. He angrily said, "This old man only knows that heroes use martial arts to violate the law. The laws of this world are all made by us Confucian cultivators. Who would use literature to interfere? There's no need to mention this kind of nitpicking theory." Speaking up to here, seventh uncle said, "Little Gongzi, my Yu family is a great Confucian cultivator family. There are many ancient records in our family. You only need to read the books of the sages in our family. Why don't you look at the teachings of other schools?" Who would have thought that Yu Zhongquan wouldn't pay attention to seventh uncle at all? He only said one sentence and hooked up with Lu Yi again. Lu Yi had always been clever. He was very congenial with Yu Zhongquan. The two of them talked passionately. If it weren't for the fact that they were on the main road, the two of them would have already beheaded a chicken and burned yellow paper. Although Yuanya didn't speak much, Lu Yi would ask him from time to time, so he didn't seem lonely. Alas, this child. Seventh uncle couldn't help but smile bitterly. He's always so unconvinced. No wonder old madam wants to arrange a marriage for him. Oh! When he heard about Yu Zhongquan's marriage, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He asked, I wonder which family's young lady is worthy of your noble son? When it came to good things in the family, seventh uncle couldn't help but show off. He didn't need Xiao Hua to ask and had already explained the matter clearly. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, this young lady's surname wasn't Huang, but Chang. She was the descendant of a great Confucian family in Xen country. She was well matched with the Yu family. Although the two families had the idea of marriage, the children of the two families were still young and didn't mention the agenda. Now that Xen country had an urgent matter that required Yifeng country's help, in order to find a suitable reason, Chang family took the initiative to propose marriage. Since Yu family had the intention of forming an alliance, the two families hit it off and settled this marriage. Yifeng country could legitimately send troops to Xine country. This was originally a good thing that would benefit both the country and the family. However, when it came to Yu Zhongquan, it was tantamount to a bolt from the blue. He had always had the ideal of being a ranger. He hoped to wield a 3-foot-long sword and sweep away all the injustices in the region. Now that he was trapped by marriage, how could he allow himself to be captured? Therefore, before the engagement ceremony was completed, he fled from home. Yu family's old ancestor felt sorry for Yu Zhongquan, so he sent seventh uncle and 2 family guards to protect him. He also brought Zhui Feng along. When seventh uncle caught up to Yu Zhongquan, he naturally gave Zhui Feng to Yu Zhongquan. Who knew that Yu Zhongquan would ride a horse and flee? Seventh uncle and the other 2 chased after him bitterly. If they hadn't been robbed by bandits, the 3 of them probably wouldn't have been able to catch up to Yu Zhongquan. Ha ha ha, with little friend Yu's character, as long as you practice a little more in the future, this Confucian cultivator's flying sword will definitely reach great success. Old Sir doesn't need to be too worried. Xiao Hua laughed heartily when he heard this and looked at Yu Zhongquan with interest. Although Yu Zhongquan wasn't a ranger right now and didn't even have the means of a ranger, he was able to pull out a sword at a critical moment. Others could call him stupid or rash, but Xiao Hua just happened to like this kind of righteous person. For this kind of person who would rather throw away his life for his own ideals, how bad could his character be? Hearing Xiao Hua mention the Confucian cultivator's flying sword, seventh uncle sneered and said without any trace of politeness, Taoist priest must also have some magical powers, but do you know what the real magical powers of us Confucian cultivators are? It's not those people who hold a treasure sword, nor are it those swordsmen who step on a flying sword and spit out a flying sword to take a person's head from 1,000 miles away. It's those great scholars who set the universe with a single word and soar to the 9 heavens. My Yu family's little Gongzi didn't walk on the righteous path of Confucian cultivators, but why did he walk on the path of flying sword? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and said curiously, I can understand a single word and soar to the 9 heavens, but what about setting the universe with a single word? Chapter 3246. The world is deteriorating day by day, and people's hearts are no longer what they used to be. People have always been opportunistic and eager for quick success. Seventh uncle snorted, even Confucian cultivators can't help but be contaminated. They gave up on the great magical powers of their ancestors and only focused on weapons. The sharpness of weapons, the heart of people, and the skillfulness of power can hurt the heavens. Although the flying sword is sharp, it is too frivolous. People today are opportunistic. I won't take it. The reason why we Confucian cultivators are called Confucians is because we use words and literature as the foundation, qi and blood as the bones. This kind of magical power is the real magical power of Confucian cultivators. Xiao Hua was confused and asked curiously, could it be that reading words and literature can defeat the enemy? Why not? Seventh uncle said proudly, the mighty power of Confucian cultivators can defeat ghost qi with just words and kill evil spirits with a single word. See? Xiao Hua suddenly realized and almost lost his voice. I finally understand. Of course, at the bank of Liao River, Emo Jianli took out a small book. After opening it, hundreds of armor inscriptions bloomed inside. Weren't these armor inscriptions hitting the shrimp soldiers and crab generals like talismans? However, Emo Jianli didn't have enough energy, so those armor inscriptions couldn't exert more power, so they didn't show anything. Armor inscriptions. Green seal inscriptions. Gold seal inscriptions. Xiao Hua sighed in his heart. Yes, since the green seal inscriptions have earth-shattering power, and the gold seal inscriptions can also have the power of Buddhist mantras in the mouth of Buddha relics, then why can't the armor inscriptions? Oh, Taoist priest, you know the power of Confucian cultivators? Seventh uncle was a little surprised. Xiao Hua smiled and told him about Emo Jianli's book. Seventh uncle nodded slightly and said with a smile, I understand. The power of the armor inscriptions is passed down from ancient times. That book is the ancient imperial weapon of Confucian cultivators. It is preserved in some Confucian sections. It is one of the magical powers that I mentioned. What I said is also commonly used by Confucian families, but it is different. As he spoke, Seventh uncle raised his hand and carefully took out a scroll from his bosom. He waved it in front of Xiao Hua's eyes and said with a smile, if I hadn't met Taoist priest earlier, I would have relied on this scroll if I wanted to rescue young Master Xiao from the hands of the bandits. This item, Xiao Hua scanned it with his divine sense and felt that this scroll was filled with a kind of overwhelming righteous energy. This righteous energy was like a sharp sword, and the scroll was basically unable to contain it. Can I take a look? Xiao Hua asked curiously. He, of course. As seventh uncle spoke, he opened his hand, and the so-called scroll opened in the wind. Hiss. Xiao Hua looked at the slowly unfolding scroll, and his pupils shrank. It was a scroll that was 1 foot wide and 3 feet long. Inside the scroll, there was the word, "Wen," written in a flamboyant style. This word was not the inscription armor, but the common language of the hidden immortal continent. However, the strokes of this word were like swords, and it contained a great righteousness. Instead of saying that it was written on the scroll, it was better to say that it was floating on it. The scroll trembled slightly, and the word seemed like it was going to fly out. Even someone as strong as Xiao Hua felt a kind of tyranny in his eyes, and a kind of suppressive fierceness came from the word. It was as if he was slightly unconvinced, it would fly out and attack. How is it? Seventh uncle smiled and said, Taoist priest doesn't seem to be an evil person. Otherwise, this scroll wouldn't need to be activated by qi or true qi, and it would automatically attack. If it was before, as long as I opened this scroll, the bandit leader would definitely turn into ashes in this word. Xiao Hua scanned the word with his divine sense, and a kind of strong repulsive force was born. He nodded and said, the power of Confucian cultivators really exceeded my expectations. This great Tao really is endless. I still have a lot to learn. Seventh uncle couldn't understand what Xiao Hua was saying. How could he know that Xiao Hua himself was also a Confucian cultivator? He laughed loudly and said, unfortunately, Taoist priest has already entered the evil path and is going further and further away. If Taoist priest goes into seclusion for another 100 years, you won't even see this word. It seemed that seventh uncle didn't believe Xiao Hua's words of seclusion for 100 years. It seems like that's really the case. Xiao Hua didn't expose him and laughed as well. He watched seventh uncle carefully put away the scroll. There was no greed in his eyes. Seventh uncle also seemed to have realized that his expression when looking at Xiao Hua was a bit different from before. After all, with Xiao Hua's cultivation level that could save Yu Zhongquan, it wasn't necessarily impossible for him to snatch the scroll. Seventh uncle's heart, which had been worried for a long time, finally calmed down. After talking for a long time and walking for a long time, it was time to rest. The Yu family's guards had already prepared some dried meat and offered it to Yu Zhongquan and seventh uncle. Seventh uncle naturally gave it to Xiaohua politely, but Xiaohua only smiled and shook his head. As for Yu Zhongquan, he naturally wanted to share the dried meat with Yuanya and Lu Yi, but he only saw the two shaking their heads. Yu Zhongquan was surprised and asked in a low voice. Lu Yi originally lied perfunctorily, but after hearing Xiaohua's voice transmission, he didn't hide it and whispered to Yu Zhongquan. Yu Zhongquan's eyes lit up and he looked back at Xiaohua several times. Xiaohua smiled and waved at Yu Zhongquan, hinting him to come over. Yu Zhongquan was also very generous. He walked over and bowed. Immortal Master, I heard that Taoists have immortal fruits that can stop one from eating for several days. I always thought that it was just a legend. Although I'm a great Confucian cultivator, after cultivating to a certain extent, I can also transcend the mortal world. But, little Gongzi, seventh uncle smiled and said, I don't know whether Taoists have such things or not. But I know that Master has already cultivated to the point where he doesn't need to eat. If you cultivate diligently, you can also achieve it. Grandpa is so hungry that he's skin and bones. In my opinion, it's better to eat more. Yu Zhongquan said disdainfully. Little Gongzi. Seventh uncle felt a bit embarrassed and said anxiously, How can you say that about Master? Xiaohua naturally knew Yu Zhongquan's thoughts. Now that he was very rebellious, not only did he think that his little wife who hadn't married him was bad, he also thought that everything in his family was bad. He didn't cherish anything that Confucian cultivators had. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given up everything to become a ranger. Hee. Xiaohua waved his hand and took out 2 spirit jujubes and handed them to Yu Zhongquan. He said with a smile, These things are just snacks for me when I'm not hungry. Hee. Thank you, Immortal Master. Yu Zhongquan took them and immediately put them to his mouth. He seemed to have heard Lu Yi say that he could only eat them in small bites. However, he didn't eat them yet. He immediately handed the other spirit jujube to seventh uncle and said, Seventh uncle, can you taste it for me first and see if it's poisonous? Seventh uncle was originally very dissatisfied with Yu Zhongquan calling Xiaohua Immortal Master, but seeing Yu Zhongquan being so filial, the dissatisfaction in his heart had already dissipated. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, Little Gongzi, if you like it, you can eat it yourself. Don't. Yu Zhongquan shouted, You came to protect me. If I accidentally take poison, how will you explain it to your family? You should eat it first. Seventh uncle's eyes were a little moist. He took the spirit jujube and was about to put it into his mouth. Seventh uncle. Xiaohua looked at the warm scene and said with a smile, If this spirit jujube doesn't have true qi, you can only eat it in small bites. You can use the Confucian cultivation method to refine this spirit jujube. Of course, I don't know if it's possible. This. Seventh uncle was stunned. He classified Xiaohua as a swindler. Just now, he earnestly taught him for a long time. Who would have thought that at this time, he would actually take out a spirit jujube? Seventh uncle knew what a spirit jujube was, but the Yu family was a Confucian family, so they were somewhat repulsed by Taoism. He always felt that using a spirit jujube was a heretical method. How could he take this kind of thing? Yu Zhongquan certainly understood what seventh uncle was thinking. He didn't care about it. He picked up the spirit jujube and took a small bite. While savoring the fragrance of the spirit jujube, he also felt the impact of the spirit jujube in his body. Wow! After a moment, Yu Zhongquan extremely exaggeratedly shouted, Seventh uncle, if you don't eat it, you will regret it. This is even more delicious than the dragon saliva pear of Green Lotus Mountain. Hee. Seventh uncle only smiled and said, If that's the case, why don't you thank Taoist priest? Yes, thank you Taoist priest. Yu Zhongquan hurriedly said. His eyes were still staring at Xiaohua's sleeve. Looking at his greedy appearance, this was the temperament of a 14 or 15-year-old youth. How could he be a rebellious youth who left home to travel without permission? I still have some, I'll give them to you together. Xiaohua was somewhat amused. With a wave of his hand, he took out a small handful and handed it to Yu Zhongquan, but these things, can't be eaten often. Yu Zhongquan was wild with joy. He didn't understand why this Taoist priest, who he didn't know, was so fond of him. Xiaohua said in all seriousness, "It's very simple. Because after eating these, you won't want to eat the food of the secular world. You can't fast, so in the future, won't you starve to death?" This kid knows? Yu Zhongquan laughed heartily. He felt that Xiaohua's words were very interesting. He took these spirit jujubes and ran to Lu Yi and Yuan Ye's side, giving 2 or 3 to each of them. Xiaohua looked at seventh uncle again. He had already hidden the spirit jujubes, so Xiaohua didn't mention this and casually chatted with seventh uncle about Confucian cultivation. Seventh uncle seemed to have also seen Xiaohua's extraordinariness. His words in the future were not lacking in respect. Of course, regarding the secrets of Confucian cultivation, especially the appearance of the Chang family's little miss, seventh uncle avoided them deeply. Xiaohua couldn't ask more even if he wanted to. Very quickly, several days passed. Ahead of them, there was a fork in the road. One road went north, the other went east. The Sun Hai Trading Company's caravan was going north, which was the capital of Jiasa country, and the road to the east was going to Bronze Pillar country. Xiaohua naturally didn't want to go to Jiasa country's capital. He was somewhat anxious to go to Bronze Pillar country. He wanted to see the situation of the auction and see if there was anything he needed. Xiao Jian originally wanted to go to the auction, but now he had lost interest. He wanted to go to Jiasa country's capital to see the excitement. However, when he heard seventh uncle of the Yu family say goodbye to Xiaohua, saying that he wanted to go to Jiasa country's capital to visit the Yu family's relatives, Xiao Jian immediately changed his mind. Ever since he met Yu Zhongquan, seventh uncle talked with Xiaohua while sizing up the surroundings. Xiao Jian was immediately listed as a swindler by seventh uncle. Chapter 3247. At first, seventh uncle was abnormally vigilant toward Xiaohua, and he was even more aggressive toward Xiao Jian. However, after several encounters, Xiao Jian distanced himself from seventh uncle. Other than Yuan Ye, who would sometimes approach Xiao Jian to greet him, only Qi Jin would often strike up a conversation with Xiao Jian. In short, Xiao Jian was very lonely on this journey. It was as if he was walking on pins and needles. It was uncomfortable, as if there was a pair of eyes behind him that wanted to see through him. Now that he had the opportunity to get rid of these eyes, how could he not cherish it? After Xiaohua and the others bid farewell to everyone, the one who was reluctant to part was Yu Zhongquan. Xiaohua was really too good to him. Not only did he give him a lot of spirit jujubes, he even obtained a chant from Lu Yi for fasting. With Yu Zhongquan's intelligence, how could he not know that this was Xiaohua's tacit approval? If Xiaohua wasn't a Taoist cultivator, Yu Zhongquan would almost think that Xiaohua wanted to take him as a disciple. Even the thought of Xiaohua's little daughter growing up appeared in his mind. Looking at Yu Zhongquan and Lu Yi hugging each other as they bid farewell, Xiaohua smiled. Since he met Yu Zhongquan again, would he let him slip away? It's just a family of Confucian cultivators. Once he recovered his cultivation, he didn't need to do anything else. As long as he gave Yu Zhongquan a pair of ranger wings, wouldn't Yu Zhongquan obediently follow him? Huang Yi. Xiaohua turned his head and looked at the depths of the sky. This Xiao doesn't know where you are, whether it's the Netherworld or Xiaoyu continent. This Xiao also doesn't know whether this Yu Zhongquan is the Yu Zhongquan you're talking about. However, this Xiao was able to meet him. This Xiao has benefited a lot from you. In the future, this karma will fall on him. If the 9 heavens were in the 9 heavens, Xiaohua suddenly laughed. If the 9 heavens were in the 9 heavens, wouldn't Huang Yi have already flown into a rage? Yu Zhongquan's little wife was actually a descendant of the great scholar surnamed Chang, and not Huang Yi. Xiao Jian finally came back to life. He was no longer as lifeless as before. He urged his horse beside Xiaohua and whispered something. Apart from a smile, there was respect on his face. He now understood that Xiaohua was definitely an unfathomable Taoist senior, not a spy like he thought from the beginning. Moreover, the word unfathomable was truly unfathomable. It wasn't the kind of word that he used to brush off others. However, after walking for more than 10 days, the surrounding scenery gradually changed. There were more and more low houses, more and more villages with smoke rising from chimneys, and even the road was much smoother and more spacious. Xiao Jian still didn't mention anything about the spirit jujube, as if he had never seen it before. Every once in a while, he would ask Yuanya to find some food for him to eat alone. Even his past and his wasted Taoist cultivation were not mentioned at all. This kind of stubbornness made Xiao Hua admire him, and some of the hatred from before lessened. Actually, humans were very complicated and had many sides. No matter what Xiao Jian's character was like, he would always have some good points. After more than 10 days, Xiao Hua and the others arrived in front of a large city. This large city was more than 10 zhang high, and the city walls were made of several feet of green bricks. There were some mottled brownish-black color in the gaps between the bricks, and there were also some dark green moss. The entire city wall wasn't particularly flat, and there were many potholes on the brick surface. The potholes were big and small, and the big ones were several feet wide, covering several large stones. The small ones were the size of a thumb and several inches deep. Between these potholes, there were hair-thin cracks connected together. In addition to the thick brownish-black color accumulated in the gaps between the bricks, the potholes on the city wall were also the same color, giving off a heavy feeling. In particular, in this dusk, the dusk revealed itself from the ground and reflected on the city wall. The light and shadow were like a sad note on the city wall. On top of the city wall, there were many banners that stretched for miles. The flagpoles of these banners were as thick as a bowl and 1 zhang high. The flags on the flagpoles were also several feet wide, and there were totems of birds and beasts drawn on them. There were also words such as Bronze Pillar Country and Su written on them. These banners fluttered in the wind, and there was a feeling of golden drums being beaten. Along with the dong 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 sounds of drums, there were people wearing battle armor and holding spears on the city wall. They quickly ran along the city wall to change positions, giving people the illusion of war. "Father, our city is so high." A childish voice sounded from Xiao Hua's side. Xiao Hua shifted his gaze away from the city wall, and he saw a 3-year-old child riding on the neck of a burly man, crying out in surprise. "Nio, this is my Bronze Pillar Country's capital. This is also what father told you before, the capital that even under the joint attack of 40,000 soldiers from 3 countries, they still couldn't take it." The burly man said in a loud voice. "Boy knows." The child's clear voice replied, "They besieged our capital for 10 days and 10 nights, but they still couldn't break through the city wall. In the end, our king led a large army back to the capital and used 8,000 soldiers to defeat the enemy, causing them to flee. Look at the marks on the city wall. They were all made by stones in the past. Those rocks are falling like rain." He immortal elder. Xiao Jian laughed. This Bronze Pillar Country is ruled by Confucian cultivator aristocratic families, but these aristocratic families are not necessarily in charge of this country. There are even other countries. The Confucian cultivator aristocratic families do not care about the wars between these countries. Moreover, even if the wars between different countries are fought, the ones to bear the brunt are the Confucian cultivator aristocratic families behind the scenes, not the city. As long as these Confucian cultivator aristocratic families have an agreement and compromise with each other, there will be no talk of attacking the city. Only when the Confucian cultivator aristocratic families are unable to coordinate will they attack the city. In fact, only when 2 Confucian cultivators are equal in strength will they start fighting. The 3 countries besieging the city that the man spoke of, as far as this junior knows, there were 3 smaller Confucian cultivator aristocratic families that wanted to replace the Confucian cultivator aristocratic family with the surname Su. So the 3 families and 3 countries attacked the Bronze Pillar Country. As for the end, it seems that the Su family invited another great Confucian cultivator to settle the war. As for what that man said about the king leading the army to save the city, that is a skillful rumor. And this old man understands. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. In this world, when things reach the ears of the common people, how can there be any truth? While they were talking, a group of children holding small lanterns ran out of the city gate, shouting happily. These lanterns were all made of green lotus leaves, and the places they illuminated were either square or oval. However, they were all painted with a green and white color, making the lanterns look like lotus flowers. Seeing this scene, Xiao Jian was stunned and sighed. "AI, today is the Hungry Ghost Festival. Time really flies." Hungry Ghost Festival? Xiao Hua naturally did not know what the Hungry Ghost Festival was, but he did not ask too much. After all, it was fine if he did not know about the Bronze Pillar country. It was just that he had cultivated for a long time and did not step into the mortal world, so it was not a big deal. If he did not even know about the usual festivals, then there would be a problem with Xiao Hua's origin. Xiao Hua did not want others to have any suspicions. After hearing Xiao Jian's agreement, Lu Yi handed the reins of the horse to Yuan Ya and disappeared into the crowd. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Lu Yi had already returned. He pointed ahead and said, "Taoist Xiao, there's a Shiluo ridge 2 miles ahead. There's a Qiang temple on it." Immediately after, he walked in front of Xiao Hua and respectfully said, "Taoist Xiao, this little one has just made some inquiries. It just so happens that there will be an auction tonight at Bright Moon Lane. That place isn't too far from Seven Suns Monastery. However, it's still early. Are you going to Qiang Temple or Bright Moon Lane?" Xiao Hua was overjoyed when he heard this and said with a smile, "Since this Xiao is also a Taoist disciple, I'll go to Qiang Temple first. It won't be too late to go to Bright Moon Lane after I'm done." "Okay, this little one will lead the way." Lu Yi took the reins from Yuan Ya's hands and walked to the front. Just after turning a few streets, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. Between the tall buildings, there was a huge garden. The people around Xiao Hua suddenly increased. Not only were there men and women behind Xiao Hua, but there were also other streets that connected to the other directions of the garden. There were also more people coming from those places. "Okay." A burst of noise came from the crowd in front. Then, a 1-foot-long lotus flower lantern rose from the crowd. The lotus flower lantern looked very exquisite. Whether it was the lotus leaves at the bottom or the flower petals around the lantern cover, they were all very lifelike. Moreover, these flower petals trembled slightly under the light of the lantern, just like a bud that was blooming. However, the lotus flower lantern had just flown a few dozen feet into the air when another voice shouted, "Today is the Hungry Ghost Festival. This lotus flower lantern should go with the flow of the water. Although flying in the air is beautiful, it doesn't conform to etiquette. Moreover, my Bronze Pillar country's capital strictly forbids foreign objects from flying in the air. If this little one's lotus flower flies too high, I'm afraid it will be shot down by the Imperial Guard's arrows. Everyone, take pity on this cute lotus flower, right? Let it go home quickly." "Okay." Everyone shouted in unison. Their voices were filled with laughter and anticipation. Pung! The sound of a sword rang out. A red sword light rushed into the air and hit the lotus flower lantern. Ingeniously, the sword light hooked slightly and brought the lotus flower lantern back. As the lotus flower lantern fell in front of everyone, the sound of cheers came from the stream again. "Hee hee, neighbors. My Bronze Pillar Academy has many students studying here. We often disturb you all. Today is the Hungry Ghost Festival, the day when 100 ghosts come out. It is also the time for us to commemorate our ancestors. My academy's students have nothing good to give everyone. Leave the finishing touch of this lotus flower lantern to us students. Although our cultivation isn't very profound, the lotus flower lantern after finishing touch will be able to bring everyone's thoughts to your loved ones in the underworld. The finishing touch of the lotus flower lantern will also be able to repel all evil." "Okay." A delicate girl clapped her hands and said, "This servant heard that Sir Zhang's scarlet character, Zhong, is the most righteous of the world and is the most effective in repelling evil. This servant specially came from 100 li away to find this place. "Sir, please bestow this character." When Xiao Hua and the others heard the sound, they had already walked closer. They saw that this was a garden about half a mu in size. Inside, there were pavilions, small bridges, winding corridors, and streams. Many green vines hung above the pavilions and winding corridors. Although it was already July's scorching summer, the night's hot wind was still a lot cooler. In particular, there were strings of purple xiaohua flowers hanging on the vines. They were only the size of soybeans. As they swayed in the wind, they emitted a faint fragrance that was really intoxicating. At this moment, there were dozens of men and women surrounding a pavilion on the left side. The pavilion was surrounded by flowing water, and the sound of water gurgling could be heard. Inside the pavilion and next to the pavilion steps, there were several white-clothed scholars. The one who spoke was a middle-aged scholar. This scholar stood in front of the steps, and the corners of his mouth were slightly tilted up. He looked as if he was smiling at any time. Although the two eyebrows that matched his beard weren't particularly slender, they were very dark. His eyes also looked ordinary, but the gaze in his eyes was deep, making people's gazes immediately captured by them. This scholar was holding a writing brush in his hand. The brush was as thick as a baby's arm and more than a foot long. The tip of the brush was stained with a thick scarlet ink, which looked a little dazzling. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that the scholar stood there, and a kind of silent temperament shrouded the entire pavilion. Moreover, this scholar's figure was tall and straight, standing there straight. Although he was holding a brush in his hand, it looked as if it was sharper than a flying sword. "Many thanks for Mrs. Favor." The scholar smiled before saying anything. His dark eyes opened, causing a woman on the winding corridor opposite to blush. "Please bring Mrs. Lotus Flower Lantern. This Jiang will give you the finishing touch." Hee. Without waiting for the girl to speak, the girl's friends beside her had already pushed her to the front. The scholar waved his hand, and the lotus flower lantern in the girl's hand immediately seemed to be taken by an invisible hand and slowly fell into the scholar's hand. Chapter 3249. Thank you, Mr. Jiang. Seeing the lotus lantern falling from the sky, the girl hurriedly grabbed it and said with a smile, "I want to put Mr. Jiang's calligraphy at home to suppress evil. I can't bear to let it flow in the stream." The girl's emotions were clearly very rich, and her expression could be considered naked. However, Mr. Jiang smiled and cupped his hands. "No matter what, I hope Miss will have a wonderful Hungry Ghost Festival." "Mr. Jiang, Mr. Jiang?" For a moment, many men and women shouted, wanting Mr. Jiang to add the finishing touches to their lotus lanterns. Thank you for your support. This Jiang is just an ordinary person in the academy. This Jiang has many martial brothers, and their cultivation is not inferior to this Jiang's. Everyone, don't worry." Mr. Jiang laughed and waved his hand. Many lotus lanterns flew out from everyone's hands and landed near the pavilion. Not only in front of Mr. Jiang, but also in front of the other students. Xiao Hua and the others were not too close to the pavilion, but when many lotus lanterns flew up, the bright lights still illuminated them. Mr. Jiang's gaze was like lightning, sweeping past the four people. When he saw Xiao Jian's Taoist robe, he unconsciously paused, and a strange expression flashed. However, this expression disappeared in a flash, and his gaze fell on the lotus lanterns again. The three principles are related to fate, and the Tao is the root. Yu 9 yang, Li Li also insufficient. Chu Chioing crown, send the carriage to the north. Cauldron sweet as syrup, seek but cannot obtain. Inside the pavilion, the sonorous and powerful chanting voice came out word by word. Many students waved their ink brushes to add the finishing touches to the lotus lanterns. Xiao Hua and the others walked out from the pavilion. This garden was lively, but this liveliness belonged to the students, to the villagers, and not to them. Other than the pavilion closest to Xiao Hua, from time to time, there were soaring true energy blooming in other places of the garden, and even some gorgeous sword energy. In this kind of noisy night, this kind of righteous night, even if it was the Hungry Ghost Festival, even if it was the night of 100 ghosts, there was no need to be afraid of ghosts approaching. right? After leaving the garden, Xiaohua and the others walked a few streets under Lu Yi's lead. The surroundings gradually quieted down. Although there were still some hanging lanterns, it was far less noisy than before. Moreover, these few streets already looked dilapidated and even a little desolate. The distance between the streets was getting longer and longer, and there was a river that wasn't particularly wide beside the street. However, the river was filled with stinky water, and the air was filled with a foul stench and a bunch of flies. A small bridge appeared in front of Xiaohua's horse. Several beggars in ragged clothes were holding dirty basins in their hands as they quickly walked past Xiaohua's horse. Xiaohua smiled because he could already see that behind the small bridge, there was a desolate slope. There were a few dilapidated shacks on the left side, and the smelly gutter-like stream on the left side was precisely circling around this desolate slope and the shacks. This must be Shilua Ridge and Seven Suns Monastery, Xiaohua thought in his heart. However, just as he was about to speak, he frowned again. With a sweep of his divine sense, he saw two black-clothed people about 100 feet away from him. They were quickly passing through a pile of ruins. They were using Qinggong to run into the distance. These people, could they be the local? Xiaohua's divine sense only swept a little, but he didn't know why these people had aroused his vigilance. After thinking for a moment, he asked, Lu Yi, is there any organization similar to the Cloak Gang in the Copper Pillar country? There is. Lu Yi replied without hesitation. Black Wind Sect. Oh? Isn't this the capital of the Copper Pillar country? How can such evil people exist? Xiaohua withdrew his divine sense and asked curiously. Without waiting for Lu Yi to speak, Xiao Jian coldly said, Senior Immortal should know that since ancient times, officials and bandits have been one family. Not to mention the borders, they exist in any country's capital. Xiaohua nodded slightly and pointed with his finger. Let's go. After crossing this bridge, Seven Suns Monastery will be in front. Clatter, clatter. The monotonous sound of horse hooves echoed in the quiet street. At the side of the lively Copper Pillar Academy, in the garden that Xiaohua had just walked through, there was a slightly dark place. Teacher Jianghu, with sweat on his forehead, was sitting there drinking tea and resting. With a sound of a flying sword, an inch-long flying sword landed in front of Teacher Jianghu's eyes. Teacher Jianghu frowned and looked left and right. With a clap of his hand, the flying sword turned into a small paper sword and stopped in his hand. When Teacher Jianghu opened the paper and saw what was inside, his expression didn't change. A sword light appeared in his hand and shredded the paper. Then he stood up and said indifferently, 100 Ghosts Parade, 100 Ghosts Parade. Hearing that the Seven Suns Monastery was right in front of him, Xiao Jian patted the horse beneath him. The horse quickened its pace and climbed onto the small bridge that wasn't too tall. At this moment, the full moon in the sky had yet to rise and the small bridge was a little blurry in the night. When Xiao Jian climbed onto the bridge, he realized that the other side of the small bridge was very low-lying. It was a vast expanse of darkness and there were occasional flickers of light. It was completely different from what he had seen before. Let's go there. Xiaohua pointed at the left side of the bridge. There was a dim yellow light there, but it wasn't obvious. AI, all the Taoist temples in the world are one family. Xiao Jian sighed. Although the capital of Copper Pillar Nation is prosperous, Seven Suns Monastery and Longevity Town's Jianghu Monastery are no different. When everyone got close to the dim yellow light, they saw a door blocked by a pile of broken tiles. This door was about 1 zhang wide and 2 zhang tall. However, Xiao Jian lost interest after a glance. There was no other reason other than the fact that it was several times bigger than the Jianghu Monastery's door. The entire Seven Suns Monastery's door looked as though someone had moved the entire Jianghu Monastery's door over. The paint on the door was dry, like the scales of a river fish that had been scraped off. Some fell off, some hung there. Even the door that was open was like the Jianghu Monastery's door. It was slanted and looked as though it was about to fall off the axle. Of course, on the two sides of the door, there were 2 big red lanterns with holes in them. On the door, although it was very clean, the words Seven Suns Monastery were still blurry. This told Xiao Jian that he wasn't dreaming of Longevity Town. Slow down, slow down. Xiao Jian had just walked to the front of Seven Suns Monastery when he heard an unusually benevolent voice. Although this voice was old and hoarse, it was extremely clear in the night sky and wind. Benevolent Lord, please eat slowly. If it's not enough, there will be more. Xiao Jian looked over in confusion. Right in front of Seven Suns Monastery, there was a big iron pot. Inside the iron pot was steaming hot porridge. In front of the iron pot, there were more than 10 beggars in ragged clothes. There were old and young beggars, and there were even a few women carrying babies on their backs. These beggars, without exception, all had their gazes on the porridge. They licked their dry lips and swallowed their saliva without concealing it. A sickly youth with a face full of stains received a bowl of porridge. He didn't care that the porridge was scalding hot and immediately drank a mouthful. Behind the iron pot, there was a short old man holding a wooden spoon in his hand. He hurriedly said to the youth. Under the light, the old man's smiling expression was as though he was looking at his own anxious grandson. Xiao Hua had already dismounted from his horse and walked behind Xiao Jian. His gaze was different from Xiao Jian's. It didn't land on the porridge, but rather on the old man. This old man was about 60 years old. His back was a little hunched, and he wore a slightly loose Taoist robe. This Taoist robe didn't seem to have any luster under the light. It was obvious that it had long been worn out. The old man's sparse white hair was neatly combed and tied into a small Taoist crown on his head. The old man was very hale and hearty, and he had a sage-like appearance. However, in Xiao Hua's eyes, this old Taoist was no different from an ordinary person. Not only did he not have any magic power, he didn't have any Taoist cultivation. Good people. The old Taoist's gaze moved away from the youth and he said apologetically, "This porridge has just been cooked. Originally, I wanted to wait for it to cool down before taking it out. However, I was afraid that you would be hungry and wait for a long time, so I hurriedly took it out. Everyone, after serving it, let it cool down a little before eating. Today is the Hungry Ghost Festival. I don't have much food, but I still have this porridge. It will definitely be enough. Thank you, Taoist." These beggars said weakly. It was obvious that they were really hungry. Some of them had already heard the sound of Xiao Jian's horse hooves and raised their eyes to look at Xiao Jian's group. The old Taoist's ears didn't seem to be working well. He didn't hear the sound of horse hooves and continued to use the spoon to scoop up a spoonful of porridge from the iron pot. His arm was trembling as he poured the porridge into the broken bowl of another beggar who had already stretched out his arm. Oh! When Xiao Jian jumped down from his horse, his figure flashed past the old Taoist's eyes. Only then did the old Taoist realize that someone was approaching. Turning his head, he saw Xiao Jian's Taoist robe. Joy flashed across the old Taoist's eyes as he called out, "Immeasurable Taoist, fellow Taoist is here? I am Xiao Jian. Greetings, senior." Xiao Jian placed a palm in front of his chest and bowed respectfully. "I don't dare. This old Taoist, Dao Shan, is only a few years older than you. I can't be considered a senior." The old Taoist didn't put down the spoon in his hand and returned the greeting with one hand. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, please wait for a moment. Once this old Taoist has given the porridge to these good people, I will invite fellow Taoist into the temple for a chat. Senior Dao Shan, please go ahead first." Xiao Jian looked at the door behind the old Taoist in bewilderment. He didn't understand. This Seven Suns Temple's door was so big, shouldn't it have some disciples? Could it be that this Dao Shan was even worse off than him? He didn't even have a disciple? The old Taoist naturally saw Xiao Hua and the others behind Xiao Jian. However, seeing that they were all young, he thought that they were Xiao Jian's disciples. He smiled kindly and scooped porridge for the beggars. However, after a short while, the old Taoist's arm trembled even more violently. Chapter 3250. Xiao Jian couldn't help but ask, "Senior, you're already old, why do you have to do everything yourself? Why don't you just leave these things to your disciple?" "Ha, fellow Taoist Xiao, every bowl of porridge should reflect on the difficulties of Taoism, Every word and action should follow the benevolence of the Taoist ancestor. Meditation is cultivation, refining energy is cultivation, giving porridge is cultivation. This old Taoist has given porridge for 50 years, even though I have one foot in the grave now, I still don't dare to neglect it. Dao Shan rested for a while and said with a smile. Hiss. Not only was Xiao Jian shocked, even Xiao Hua was greatly shocked. Giving porridge for 50 years. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Immediately, Xiao Hua felt that he had lived for 200 years in vain. Although that was what he said, Dao Shan was old after all, and the wooden spoon was big. This old Taoist scooped a few more spoonfuls and couldn't scoop any more. Xiao Jian shouted, "Where the hell did you go? Hurry up and help your senior get the porridge." "Yes, master," Yuanya answered and came out. However, when Yuanya came out from the shadow behind Xiao Hua, his figure flashed past the porridge, and the group of beggars were all frightened. "Taoist Xiao, let me do it." Lu Yi saw that although Dao Shan didn't frown, there was obviously some worry in his eyes, so he hurriedly jumped down from the carriage. Lu Yi's mouth was sweet. He walked in front of Dao Shan and bowed respectfully. "Grandpa Dao, you've been doing good all your life, and this kindness must be passed down. I, Lu Yi, am not talented, but I'm willing to accept the root of kindness of our Taoism and continue doing good deeds. If Grandpa Dao is still worried, how about you give me some pointers on my cultivation?" But Dao Shan looked at Lu Yi's cleverness and his pleasing words. He had to give the spoon to Lu even if he didn't want to. However, Dao Shan was still standing at the side. He watched as Lu Yi filled every beggar's bowl to the brim without any slack. Only then did he feel relieved and turned to Xiao Jian, saying, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're so lucky. Your disciple is 100 times better than my disciple." "I don't dare." Xiao Jian hurriedly waved his hand and let Xiao Hua go. He smiled and said, "Lu Yi is senior servant, not my disciple." Dao Shan was obviously stunned. Looking at Xiao Hua's youthful face, he seemed to have understood something. He hurriedly tidied up his Taoist robe and bowed respectfully. "I, Dao Shan, greet senior." How could Xiao Hua bear to let this benevolent old Taoist bow to him? With a wave of his hand, the old Taoist was unable to bow down. Xiao Hua rushed to bow first and said, "I, Xiao Hua, greet great master Dao Shan." Dao Shan was unable to kneel down, and he knew that Xiao Hua had an extraordinary background. His eyes flashed with surprise, and then he smiled bitterly. "I don't practice Taoism, I only read Taoism scriptures. I'm not good at soliciting alms, I only know how to give alms. I've never practiced Taoism, so how can I be called a master?" "Grandmaster, you're wrong," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "There are countless paths of cultivation, and none of them are smooth. The great master prioritizes kindness. His actions are like a drop of water. For nearly 60 years, he has benefited all living beings. Although I have done good deeds before, if I am as persistent as Grandmaster, I can't. If Grandmaster can't be called a Grandmaster, then who can? If Grandmaster isn't a Grandmaster, then there are no Grandmasters in this hidden immortal continent." "Senior." Dao Shan was still modest. "I entered Taoism when I was young, and I have always admired people like you who have remarkable Taoism skills. However, I have never had such an opportunity in my life. Therefore, I used such a meager method to do my best for Taoism. This is really not worth mentioning in front of Senior. Senior's words make me ashamed. Call me fellow Taoist," Xiao Hua said with a smile. He really didn't want to be called Senior by such an old man. After all, the old man had reached the end of his life. Although he was old, he was still in his prime. "Yes, fellow Taoist Xiao." Dao Shan was very happy. However, when he spoke, he realized something. "So you two fellow Taoists are from the same family." "Fellow Taoist, you're wrong." Xiao Hua shook his head. "I only met Taoist Xiao by chance. All Taoism in the world is from the same family. Meeting each other is fate," Dao Shan said with a smile. Then, he looked at the many beggars who were slowly rushing over from afar. The smile on his face disappeared. "Sigh, this year, Bronze Pillar Nation is expanding its army. The number of beggars in the country is increasing. Goo goo. Xiao Jian's stomach actually started to growl. Although the old Taoist's ears weren't very good, he was really close to Xiao Jian. Xiao Jian's thunderous growl immediately made him understand. Hee hee, I am really happy to see fellow Taoist. Sorry for the lack of manners. Dao Shan smiled and said, Fellow Taoists, please wait for a moment. I will call my disciples out to welcome you. Don't. Xiao Hua saw Dao Shan's neat clothes and knew that the old Taoist was very particular about it. He didn't know what kind of etiquette Dao Shan had, so he hurriedly stopped him. However, Dao Shan waved his hand and said, Confucian cultivators have always been about etiquette. They use etiquette to govern the country. Although Taoism doesn't have too many complicated etiquettes, fellow Taoist came from afar. My Seven Sons Temple has to treat you seriously. If Confucian cultivators were to see this, they would definitely mock my Taoism. Xiao Hua wanted to say more, but Xiao Jian smiled and said, Senior Dao Shan's Seven Sons Temple is a real Taoist temple. If you don't let him welcome Senior in, I'm afraid you will lose face for my Taoism. It won't look good if word gets out. All right. Xiao Hua was curious. He didn't understand why a Taoist temple needed to welcome him. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the iron pot in front of Seven Sons Temple was already empty. However, there were still many skinny and sallow beggars in front of the iron pot. These beggars saw that the porridge was gone and left in disappointment. However, there were still some who looked at it and stubbornly stayed in front of the iron pot. Taoist. Looking at the empty door, Lu Yi said softly, Are we letting these people leave? Xiao Hua smiled and said, Let them wait first. Once we enter, we will let Master Dao Shan cook the porridge. Yes, Lu Yi said softly. Those beggars were all overjoyed and obediently waited there. Just as they were talking, a string of music came from the Seven Sons Temple. Then, a few skinny Taoist children walked out from the door with either a flute, or a shing in their hands. Behind these Taoist children, there was Dao Shan who led a dozen or so neatly dressed middle-aged and old Taoist priests. Dao Shan, who was walking at the front, was even holding a long, white plank-like thing in his hand. Xiao Hua wanted to ask Xiao Jian, but Xiao Jian's face had already turned solemn. He quickly walked to the door of Seven Sons Temple and stood straight with his hands in his Taoist robe. He lowered his head and looked at the ground. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly walked to Xiao Jian's side and stood still. Seeing Xiao Hua come, Xiao Jian hurriedly took half a step back to show the difference. Lu Yi was quick-witted. He hurriedly pulled Yuanya, who was stunned at the side, and stood beside Xiao Hua while Xiao Jian was behind him. He let Yuanya stand beside him so that he was facing Xiao Jian. Dao Shan and the others walked in front of Xiao Hua. They didn't say anything until the song ended. Only then did they say, I, Dao Shan of Seven Sons Temple welcome Senior Xiao Hua and fellow Taoist Xiao Jian to my Seven Sons Temple. Following these words, Dao Shan raised the plank and bowed respectfully. Disciples welcome Senior Xiao. Even though they saw that Xiao Hua was very young, many Taoist priests still bowed respectfully. Xiao Hua and the others also returned the bow. Although Xiao Hua didn't know the specific etiquette, he still raised his hand and the dozen or so people were lifted up by him. Everyone was shocked. Senior Xiao, please enter the temple to pay respects to the Taoist ancestor. Dao Shan's expression didn't change. He said word by word and turned around. Yes, master, please. Xiao Hua replied and walked towards Dao Shan. When Xiao Hua's figure passed by Dao Shan also walked forward and accompanied Xiao Hua into the temple. Seven Sons Temple wasn't small. After entering the temple, they saw a rather large courtyard. There were 2 rows of rooms on the east and west. Opposite them was a very imposing hall. Although these rooms were old, their scale was far from what Tidal River Temple could compare to. In particular, there were 2 side doors on both sides of the hall that led directly to the back of the hall. Thinking of the scene he saw from the small bridge, Xiao Hua knew that there was a large place behind the hall even without Dao Shan's introduction. The hall was brightly lit. In addition to a few oil lamps in the hall, there were 3 arm-thick red candles burning brightly on the altar table. In addition to the red candles, there was also an incense burner on the altar table. A few incense sticks rose in spirals from the incense burner. On both sides of the incense burner, there were several plates. On the plates were some rice, noodles, grains, and so on. However, what puzzled Xiaohua was that there was no statue of a Dao ancestor behind the altar table. Chapter 3251. Although he had already greeted Dao Shan and the others outside the Seven Suns Temple, Xiaohua still followed the so-called etiquette of the Taoist sect and greeted them again. After the greeting, Dao Shan's smile became even wider. He walked to the altar and placed the jade board on it. Then, he picked up 3 incense sticks and said to Xiaohua with a smile, "Senior Xiao, please light the incense for the Taoist ancestor." But Xiaohua took the incense sticks and waved his hand. A flame flashed and the 3 incense sticks were immediately lit. A strange expression appeared in the eyes of the dozens of disciples who saw this. After Xiaohua respectfully placed the incense sticks on the incense burner, Dao Shan was obviously relieved. He raised his hand and said, "Thank you, Senior Xiao. Please come to the side hall for tea." As he spoke, the Taoist children holding the flute and other musical instruments started playing again. Under Dao Shan's lead, Xiaohua walked past a yellow curtain and arrived at the side hall. There was a yellow praying mat and a few tables and chairs here. However, Dao Shan didn't sit down immediately when he walked to the chair. Instead, he closed his eyes slightly. This made Xiaohua confused. He looked at Xiao Jian and was also confused. However, the two of them could only do as they were told. When the music floated into the night sky, Dao Shan opened his eyes and raised his hand with a smile. "Senior, fellow Taoist, please sit." "Fellow Taoist, please." Xiaohua smiled and sat down. After that, Xiao Jian and Dao Shan also sat down. Lu Yi and Yuan Ya obediently stood behind the two of them. A Taoist child with delicate features hurriedly came over with a tray that had some paint chipped off. He brought over 3 cups of green tea. When the Taoist child went down, he seemed to have something to say. However, when he saw that Dao Shan's attention was on Xiaohua, he didn't dare to speak. He waved his hand at a slightly older disciple behind Dao Shan and went down. That older disciple glanced at Dao Shan, who was talking to Xiaohua, and nodded slightly at Xiaohua. Then he quietly walked out. Dao Shan's ears weren't very good, so he naturally didn't notice. "Senior Xiao, where do you cultivate? How many disciples do you have?" Dao Shan asked respectfully after inviting Xiaohua to drink a mouthful of tea. Xiaohua drank a mouthful of tea. This tea was very bitter and astringent, making the tea somewhat black. Xiaohua only touched his lips and felt relieved. He replied with a smile, "I'll let Grandmaster know. This Xiao used to cultivate overseas, so I don't have any disciples. This Lu Yi is just a servant." "Overseas?" Dao Shan's eyes lit up. He said anxiously, "Is it the Eastern Sea? When I was young, I wanted to go to the East Sea to take a look, but until now, I still haven't had the chance to see the magnificent East Sea." Xiaohua smiled and shook his head. "Don't ask too much about which overseas master. In short, it's very far. Of course, if you want to go, you can find some time to go and take a look." "Sigh, I am old. I can't walk anymore," Dao Shan said with a smile. Although it sounded like a sigh, there wasn't much sadness in his tone. Xiaohua comforted, "Grandmaster is wrong. Grandmaster's good deeds are clear. The heavenly Tao is naturally fair. It definitely won't let Grandmaster give up at such a young age. There are too few people like Grandmaster in this world. Since Grandmaster has met me, it's an opportunity given to Grandmaster by Dao Zhu. Grandmaster will continue to do good deeds in the Seven Suns Temple in the future." "Hee, thank you, Senior, for your auspicious words." Dao Shan knew that Xiaohua was a cultivator, but he didn't dare to believe what Xiaohua said. He only smiled and said, Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to take out the rejuvenation pill. After all, Dao Shan was an ordinary person. Xiaohua didn't know if Dao Shan could withstand the effects of the rejuvenation pill. Since he came to the Seven Suns Temple, He naturally wanted to help this kind person from the Dao sect to live a long life. Rumble. Xiao Jian was already hungry. Now that he drank a few mouthfuls of tea, he became even hungrier. "Ha, I forgot." Dao Shan laughed. He turned his head and ordered, "Disciple, go and get a bowl of porridge for Martial Uncle Xiao." A disciple behind Dao Shan had a difficult expression. However, he still responded and prepared to leave. At this moment, the disciple who just walked out returned to the entrance of the main hall. When he heard Dao Shan's order, he hurriedly walked to Dao Shan's side and whispered a few words. Dao Shan frowned and a trace of awkwardness appeared on his face. He then smiled and said to Xiao Jian, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, you must be joking. I have already finished the porridge. Moreover, today is the Hungry Ghost Festival. This old Taoist wants to let the benevolent masters around me eat more, so I cooked all the food in the temple into plain porridge. Now that there is no food in the temple, this old Taoist will ask my disciples to pick some vegetables from the backyard. Fellow Taoist, you can cook some. Tomorrow morning, this old Taoist disciples will sell the vegetables in the market and buy some food." Xiao Hua, who was at the side, heard everything clearly. He smiled and said, "Master, you don't have to be so polite. There is no need to persuade the kind people outside to leave. Previously, you were the one who gave the porridge. Now, it is time for me to give the porridge. Master, please let your disciples send me to the place where we store the food." "Oh, Senior Xiao, this is..." Dao Shan didn't understand. Obviously, he didn't understand the Dao sect's spells. "Senior, Immortal Xiao is a famous cultivator in our Dao sect. He has the ability to transform beings into soldiers and move mountains and seas. You only need to bring Immortal Xiao there." Xiao Jian said with a smile. Dao Shan naturally wouldn't let his disciple bring Xiao Hua there. He personally brought Xiao Hua to the main hall and walked through a few deserted courtyards. Finally, they arrived in front of a small courtyard. Xiao Hua glanced at the wooden door on the left side of the courtyard. Outside the door, under the moonlight, there were a lot of vegetables. In this courtyard, there were two Taoists with strong hands and feet. They were washing the iron pot that they just brought back from outside the temple. Inside here, Dao Shan raised his hand and was about to speak. Xiao Hua shook his head and said, "This place is too small. Is there a bigger place?" Dao Shan was helpless. He pointed to a few houses opposite the courtyard and said, "This is where the winter vegetables are stored. It is empty now. Senior, do you really have a spell that can make something out of nothing? Seeing is believing. Hearing is false." Xiao Hua strode to the front of the few houses. He waved his hand a few times and said with a smile, "Master, take a look for yourself." Dao Shan held a lantern in his hand as he walked shakily to the front of a house. Looking at the tightly packed food inside, tears almost flowed out of his eyes. Shanzai, Shanzai, this winter, my 7 sons' monastery will not starve to death again." Sweat. Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. It is only summer and old Taoist Dao Shan is already thinking of giving out porridge in winter. It seems like this kindness has already penetrated deep into old Taoist's bone marrow. "Quick, disciples. Let's cook some porridge and invite Senior Xiao to eat. Hurry up and cook the porridge with the iron pot. Let benevolent master outside the temple eat his fill." Dao Shan hurriedly instructed. Dao Shan's disciples all went crazy. They looked at the few houses again and again. After confirming that the food inside was piled up like a mountain, they carefully took some of it to the opposite courtyard and let the Taoist cook it. Everyone looked at Xiao Hua with reverence and respect. This was no different from the immortal Xiao Hua in their hearts. "AI, Senior Xiao indeed has divine skills." Dao Shan accompanied Xiao Hua back to the side hall. He said emotionally, "This is something that Junior would never have dreamed of." "What divine skills?" Xiao Hua waved his hand. "It's just that this Xiao has a Qiankuan pouch and carries some food with me." Dao Shan really didn't know what a Qiankuan pouch was. He only understood after Xiao Jian explained it to him. "Wait till tomorrow. This Xiao will let you see what a true divine skill is." Xiao Hua pretended to be mysterious and said, "Okay, Junior will wait and see." Dao Shan didn't know what Xiaohua wanted to do. He only smiled and agreed. Xiaohua looked at the main hall and asked again. This Xiao remembers that there should be a golden body in the Taoist temple. Why isn't our Taoist ancestor here? I'll let senior know. When this matter was mentioned, Dao Shan's face revealed a worried expression. Tongzhou country was founded by Confucian cultivators and has always rejected our Taoist sect. This Shiluo Ridge originally didn't have any Taoist temples. 100 years ago, it was just a barren slope. All the dirty things in the country were discarded here. Later on, this Taoist ancestor came here and used silver to buy this barren slope. He then built the Qiang temple here. Later on, the king asked about this matter and wanted to demolish the Qiang temple. The Taoist ancestor led a few disciples and went on a hunger strike for 10 days straight. Seeing that our Taoist disciples were determined to keep the Taoist temple, the king was touched and agreed not to demolish the Qiang temple. However, he also didn't allow any golden bodies to be erected in the temple. Thus, the Taoist ancestor placed the spirit tablets of the previous generations of seniors here to worship. Chapter 3252. Oh! Xiaohua did not understand. He smiled and asked, I have some primeval stones here and want to go there to do some transactions. Also, I heard that there is an auction there tonight. I want to go there to take a look. I wonder, what is wrong with that? If that is the case, then I can be at ease. Dao Shan understood and nodded. He pointed with his finger and said, Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. I will call my disciples over and let them go over. There is no need. Xiaohua had already scanned the area with his divine sense. Other than a few Taoists who were swallowing their saliva behind Dao Shan, the rest of the Taoists were gathered in the courtyard, wolfing down the porridge. He finally understood why Dao Shan wanted to personally guard the beggars outside Seven Suns Temple. Thus, Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and said, Lu Yi has already found out the location of Bright Moon Lane. Actually knew it with one look. Fellow Taoists need not worry. Alright, how could Dao Shan not know what his disciple was like? He stood up and said, I will send senior out. Fellow Taoist, just let your disciples watch over my horses. Xiaohua waved his hand and quickly walked out with Lu. As for Xiao Jian, he was slightly stunned but still hurriedly followed behind. Although he did not have any primeval stones, he still wanted to go to Bright Moon Lane to watch the show. This Seven Suns Temple made him feel like he was looking at something that hurt people. When Xiaohua stepped out of Seven Suns Temple, he was slightly shocked and felt a little uncomfortable. When he was about to release his divine sense, the beggars who were giving out porridge and eating porridge in front of the door all looked at him. The few people who were waiting earlier hurriedly shouted, Thank you, Immortal Elder, for the porridge. It seemed like the disciples of Seven Suns Temple had already shown off Xiaohua's immortal method of conjuring food to these beggars. No need to thank me, no need to thank me. This is all due to Master Dao Shan's mercy. Xiaohua said and hurriedly brought Lu Yi and the rest out of Seven Suns Temple. After walking far away, Xiaohua released his divine sense again and carefully observed Seven Suns Temple. He did not find anything wrong and could not help but feel strange. Strange? Is this vigilance? It doesn't seem like it. What kind of sudden impulse? Over the past 100 years, the primordial spirit that Xiaohua had split into the hand of karma had been comprehending the divination technique given by Jiuxia. Although this primordial spirit had fused with the hand of karma and had an innate advantage over ordinary cultivators comprehending this divine technique, the divination technique was too profound after all. There was not much difference between 100 years and 10 years. Xiaohua did not make any special progress in his cultivation. Just like the primordial spirit that had merged with the heavenly Tao and had now turned into a real star, although it had changed from formless to corporeal, and even had the profound mysteries of the origin of Earth, Xiaohua still couldn't obtain too much from the heavenly Tao. Just like the mountain peak in front of him that pierced the sky, Xiaohua was looking for a path to climb from the bottom of the mountain. Now, he had found it and was climbing, but this mountain was really too big. After climbing for a day, a year, or even 100 years, Compared to the entire mountain peak, it was almost the same. Therefore, although Xiao Hua's heart seemed to have been hit by a sudden impulse, he still didn't understand what it was, nor did he know whether this feeling was good or bad. Could it be that there's something strange about Bright Moon Lane? Xiao Hua frowned slightly. Looking at Lu Yuanya and Xiao Jian who were following close behind him, he pondered, how about not letting them go to Bright Moon Lane? I'll go and take a look myself? But looking at Lu Yi and the others' excited expressions, as if they were also looking forward to the auction, Xiao Hua gave up on the idea. Bright Moon Lane was indeed not far, and they reached it in less than an hour. When he saw the liveliness of Bright Moon Lane, Xiao Hua finally understood Dao Shan's astonishment. It was also on the side of a stream, and this stream was 10 times the size of the one in Seven Suns Monastery. The water of this stream was clear and gurgling. Lotus lanterns were hung on the willows by the shore, and the stream reflected the light of the lanterns. What was special was that there were many different kinds of pleasure boats on the stream. Some had canopies, some didn't, and all of them were hung with lotus lanterns, leisurely drifting on the stream. Not to mention the dancers on the pleasure boats playing the pipa, not to mention the women playing the zither outside the pleasure boats, not to mention the white-robed scholars standing at the bow of the pleasure boats reciting poetry. Just these pleasure boats and lanterns were a beautiful scene that was completely different from the desolate Seven Suns Monastery. Similarly, there was a small bridge that spanned across the stream. Xiao Hua and the others walked to the head of the bridge, and saw a small boat that looked like a fallen leaf flowing under the bridge. They heard the sound of a zither that was even more tinkling than the flowing water, and then smelled the thick fragrance of cosmetics mixed with the faint fragrance of the night sky. The cosmetics came from the dancers who lived in the night, and the fragrance came from the blooming flowers among the green leaves that flowed like a stream. Many of them sighed with emotion. They were all living the same life, but some chose to be drunk, some chose to be pure, some endured starvation for the sake of beggars, and some spent a fortune for the sake of a beauty smile. However, what made them sigh with emotion was not only that. When they stood at the head of the bridge, there was a huge archway in front of them. It was at least 10 feet tall, and this archway was extremely luxurious. Although they couldn't see clearly what material it was made of in the night, just by looking at the archway itself, they could see that it didn't have any lanterns. Instead, it emitted a faint light under the surrounding lanterns, and this light emitted different colors from different parts of the archway. Even the 3 large words Bright Moon Lane on the archway was simply a rainbow color. This rainbow color was different from the usual brilliance of magic treasures that Xiao Hua had seen before. This rainbow color had a kind of domineering, a kind of dazzling feeling, and gave people an indescribable impulse when they saw it. Behind this archway, there was a narrow street that was several feet wide. On both sides of the street were 3-story buildings, and all of them were brightly lit, with the sounds of orioles and swallows dancing. Moreover, looking further, there were several crisscrossing streets and countless rows of small buildings. Not to mention the incomparable ostentatiousness of this Bright Moon Lane in the night sky. Even the lights of the Bright Moon Lane that were comparable to the natural bright moon reflected in the night sky only made this corner of the Copper Pillar country a nightless place. Xiao Hua and the others stood quietly at the head of the bridge. The spacious bridge was once again filled with people weaving together. Some were walking out of the Bright Moon Lane with drunken smiles, some were hugging beauties, and even more were like Xiao Hua and the others, entering the Bright Moon Lane from the side of the river. In their eyes, they didn't care about the outer appearance of the Bright Moon Lane, they only cared about the inner meaning of the Bright Moon Lane. Let's go and take a look. Xiao Hua used his divine sense to scan the place. There were quite a few places that were unbearable, but Xiao Hua was too lazy to continue looking. After giving an order, he walked down from the bridge. I owed these Taoist masters? How about coming to our top floor to take a look? Just as they walked down from the bridge, a woman with heavy makeup who had been staring at them for a long time already pounced over. She wanted to grab Xiao Hua, who was in front of her, and opened her mouth wide with a smile. The girls in our building love handsome men the most. With a glance, I can tell that this Taoist master and the others are not ordinary. They will definitely be considerate to you. Xiaohua's face didn't have any expression, as if he didn't see or hear anything. His gaze was very clear as he looked forward. As for the hand that the woman used to grab Xiaohua's sleeve, she simply couldn't touch Xiaohua's Taoist robe. A seemingly invisible barrier separated the two, as if the two were not in the same world. This Taoist master? That woman couldn't grab Xiaohua, so she didn't hesitate at all. She stretched out her hand to grab Xiaojian, and said respectfully, "Your appearance is comparable to Pan An's. You are the one that my family's girls love. Come. This servant will introduce you to the #1 courtesan of the Bright Moon Lane." Xiaojian, who usually looked a bit wretched, coldly looked at that woman. He touched his chest and said coldly, "This Taoist master only has 2 copper coins here. Can the big sister of the top floor see this Taoist master?" Xiaojian's voice wasn't soft, and the smile on that woman's face slightly stiffened. She immediately threw him a coquettish glance and said with a very charming smile, "This Taoist master is joking with this servant. There are more than 1 Taoist masters and Buddhist masters who come to my top floor. You unworldly experts are the most generous." He looked at Xiaojian with interest and asked curiously, "What do you mean?" Xiaojian's current life and experience seemed to be similar to the women in the brothel. He wore a light veil and was hard to understand. His words made Xiaohua even more puzzled. Chapter 3253. Senior Dao Shan is free. He is doing what he likes. Although he is poor, he is willing and never tired of it. It can be said that Senior Dao Shan's life is the result of his desire for benevolence. It is also a kind of cultivation for him. Xiaojian is not afraid at all and says with great vicissitudes of life, "And these women, although they seem to be living a luxurious life, these flashy clothes are unable to cover the tears behind their backs. Senior, do you think they are willing? A pair of jade arms for 1,000 people to sleep on, 2 red lips for 10,000 guests to taste. This kind of life is not something that everyone here can endure. But they have no choice, they have no freedom. They have no choice but to live this kind of life. They have no choice but to give themselves a chance to live. Senior, look behind you. That stream is filled with pleasure boats. Although it is 100 times more beautiful than the stream in Seven Suns Monastery and smells 10,000 times more fragrant, but Junior can say with certainty that there are more bones buried in this stream than in Seven Suns Monastery's stinky river. Those women who are unable to endure the loneliness, unable to endure this birdcage-like life, unable to see their own hope, unable to see a trace of sunshine that belongs to them, most of them would choose to bury their past in this seemingly clear stream. Senior, they are actually the most pitiful worms. Xiaojian sighs. Compared to them, Senior Dao Shan is living in an immortal palace. Hee hee. Xiaohua laughs and looks at this Taoist who has countless stories and says, "Rather than choosing to be buried here, why not wash away all the dirt? They have the courage to leave this world. Why don't they have the courage to leave Bright Moon Lane? Rather than saying that they are pitiful, it is more like they chose to be pitiful and chose to escape. The heavens have always been merciful and always leave a way out for people. If they don't find the right way out, what can others do?" Senior, leaving this luxury and going from complicated to simple, is this something that ordinary people can do? Xiaojian knows that Xiaohua does not understand and says again, "In this Bright Moon Lane, it is extremely difficult to regain one's freedom. Death is much easier than freedom." Perhaps. Xiaohua had lived for so many years, but he really didn't understand the inner workings of the brothel. Naturally, he didn't understand what Xiaojian was saying, but he still chose to believe. Being a person, no matter where, is extremely difficult. Taoist priest. Lu Yi ran over from afar, his face covered in makeup. Afraid that he had been taken advantage of by others, he shouted, "I've already found out that the auction will be held at Zhai Xing Lu Taoist priest. Please follow me there." Zhai Xing Lu? What a big tone. Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand. "Lead the way. This Xiao wants to see what kind of grandeur this Zhai Xing Lu has." However, the style of the secular world naturally could not compare to the style of a cultivator. Although there was a tall pavilion that stood out from the rest of the three-story pavilions in Bright Moon Lane, the pavilion was also decorated with flying dragons and flying phoenixes. Xiaohua did not know which calligraphy master had written the words "Star Plucking Pavilion" on the signboard, but when he looked at it, he could not help but feel disappointed. It's only a so-so. Xiaohua looked at the brightly lit Zhai Xinglu and said indifferently, "Immortal Elder." Xiao Jian looked at Zhai Xinglu and seemed to think of something. He frowned and hurriedly said in a low voice, "This junior seems to have some impression." Zhai Xinglu's origin is somewhat unusual. Oh? What's unusual about it? This junior remembers that there seems to be a Zhai Xinglu in the state of Danliang. Xiao Jian said in a low voice. Of course, this matter is too small for this junior to remember clearly. Back then, there seemed to be some alliance that wanted to build this Zhai Xinglu in the state of Danliang. This junior only took a look. As for whether it was built or not, this junior has already forgotten. If it's in the state of Danliang, the state of Bronze Pillar also has it. Maybe the state of Shi and the state of Jiasa also have it. This Xiao understands. Xiao Hua snorted. Who cares about its origin? This Xiao is only here to trade. I don't intend to tear down this Zhai Xinglu. Why won't they let this Xiao in? Moreover, since this Zhai Xinglu is able to sell vitality stones, there must be someone supporting it. Without any origin, how is it possible? Yes, this junior is only reminding senior. Xiao Jian said with a smile. Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Jian with a smile that didn't look like a smile. If you didn't lose those vitality stones to the escorts, any one of them could be exchanged for a lot of money here. Not only would it allow Master Dao Shan to give out porridge with peace of mind, but it would also allow the girl who you said had a tragic life with no freedom to be redeemed from the brothel. Don't you think it's a pity? Now that I think about it, it is indeed a pity. Xiao Jian didn't hide it and said in a low voice, however, those vitality stones belong to this junior. Whatever this junior does is this junior's freedom. If this junior loses the freedom to choose because of the freedom of those girls, this junior would rather not have such an opportunity. Xiao Huan nodded and didn't want to say anything more. There was a small empty space behind the signboard of Zhai Xinglu. At this time, there were some car doors parked there. There were also some handsome youths dressed in green who were waiting behind the balcony. Seeing Xiao Hua and the others standing at the door, they first chatted for a while before walking in. How could they not know that these were Taoist priests who were participating in the auction? There were already two youths dressed in green who had smiles on their faces and quickly walked up to welcome them. However, before they could open their mouths and before Xiao Hua and the others could get close to the balcony, hiss! A hissing sound like a dragon's roar came from the left side of Xiao Hua and the others. It was the opposite side of where Xiao Hua and the others came from. Not only were the youths in green shocked, even Xiao Hua was stunned. Everyone looked at the source of the dragon's roar in unison and felt even more bewildered. This Copper Pillar country, where did the dragon come from? In the night sky, 4 pure white heavenly horses stepped on faint white clouds as if they were descending from the sky. Their bodies flashed with white light as if they were tearing apart the night sky and flying out from the depths of the darkness. Its white mane, which was more than a foot long, swayed with the night wind like a dreamy mist. Its 4 hooves fluttered in the wind, its head proudly raised to the sky, and its galloping free and easy like a swimming dragon. It really made people wonder if this was a dream encounter. Not only that, behind the 4 heavenly horses, there was a carriage cast from gold. This carriage was also floating in the air. The carriage was 1 zhang in size and there were exquisite patterns on it. Some of these patterns were flowers, some were grass, and some were birds and people. In the center of the 2 sides of the carriage, there were 2 large jade lotus flowers. These jade lotus flowers almost filled up the 2 doors of the carriage. As for the one standing on the carriage and driving the 4 heavenly horses, it was a strong man dressed in golden armor. Dragon. Dragon horse. Xiao Jian, who was beside Xiao Hua, couldn't help but exclaim, This world really has such a precious horse? The golden carriage pulled by the dragon horse was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the front of Zhai Xinglu and arrived in front of Xiao Hua and the others. The dragon horse was about to crash into Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua didn't seem to have any intention of moving out of the way. Taoist. At this moment, the youths in green came to their senses and hurriedly shouted. Hiss! Another 4 dragon-like horse cries sounded at the same time. The sound shook the night sky. The 4 dragon horses stopped abruptly, just a foot away from Xiao Hua. Do you want to die? The strong man dressed in golden armor was furious. With a wave of his hand, a whip flashed and lashed towards Xiao Hua. The strong man was 1 zhang tall and stood on the carriage. The whip actually made a faint whimpering sound in the air, as if it was going to cut off the air. Not good. Several youths in green panicked and cried out in their hearts. They saw the jade lotus on the carriage and already knew who was coming. But they knew that they couldn't stop this whip, so no one dared to speak. A few of the kind-hearted youths had already closed their eyes. They knew that even if it was a stone lion, it would probably be smashed into smithereens by this whip. This seemingly thin and weak young Taoist would probably be smashed into minced meat. Pa! A crisp sound followed by a sneer, You can come down. Then there was another woo sound, followed by a ping sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. The entire area in front of Zhai Xinglu was deathly silent. This is... The timid youth in green hastily opened his eyes. He looked with some disbelief at the strong man who was also standing on the ground in a daze. The bold youth saw clearly that in the blink of an eye, Xiao Hua, who was standing calmly in front of the dragon horse, had grabbed the whip. Then, Xiao Hua gave a casual tug and the brawny man in golden armor was immediately sent flying from the carriage. Without any resistance, he landed on the ground in front of Zhai Xinglu. How dare you? A cold voice came from the golden carriage. Hiss! The 4 dragon horses stretched out their necks and neighed at the same time. They opened their mouths and bit toward Xiao Hua like real dragons. Xiao Hua sneered. His figure rushed towards the center of the dragon horses like a ghost. He very cleverly landed between the 2 dragon horses in the middle. Then, he spread his arms and patted the backs of the 2 dragon horses like a great pung spreading its wings. Oh! The 2 dragon horses let out a mournful cry. Their entire bodies fell with Xiao Hua. When their 4 hooves landed on the ground, they trembled violently, as if they were about to kneel down at any time. Damned little Taoist! Along with this cold voice, the door of the golden carriage opened. A young Confucian scholar walked out, holding a folding fan in his hand. His face was filled with shame and anger, and his eyes seemed to be full of spirit, but there was a trace of ruthlessness in them. "Io, young Master Duanmu, you've finally come?" Just as this young Confucian scholar was about to walk towards Xiao Hua, an extremely loud and clear voice came from below the signboard of Zhai Xinglu. Then, a similarly dressed middle-aged Confucian scholar quickly walked over. His face carried a smile like a spring breeze. "I'll go now." "Good, that's a good boy. I'll dote on you too." The burly man reached out and patted the youth's shoulder. The youth trembled and almost fell to the ground. Not sure if it was because the burly man was too strong, or if the burly man's words were too powerful. Walking past the huge shadow of Zhai Xinglu's signboard, Xiao Jian was worried and said softly, "Senior, you were a little impulsive just now." Xiao Hua smiled and said curiously, "Fellow Taoist Xiao is considered experienced and knowledgeable. You can't be so petty, right? You even approved the construction of Zhai Xinglu back then. You were also the ruler of a country." A bitter smile appeared on Xiao Jian's face as he said, "Times have changed. I'm now a Taoist priest in dire straits. I don't dare to mention my past bravery. Moreover, this Zhai Xinglu is different from Duanmu family. I don't know about Zhai Xinglu's background, but Duanmu family's background, Senior isn't afraid? Duanmu family? Xiaohua's eyes turned as he had a bad feeling in his heart. He said softly, "Is this family very powerful?" Senior really doesn't know? Didn't you see the 2 jade lotuses on the golden carriage? That's the symbol of Duanmu family. Only the direct descendants of Duanmu family have the right to use this symbol. This time it was Xiao Jian's turn to be shocked. Although this Duanmu family isn't the #1 scholarly family in hidden immortal continent, but it's still at the forefront of the first class. It can almost be compared to the first-class families. Not to mention that you and I are unable to contend against them in our current situation. Even if we use the power of a country, it would still be hard to match them. Oh, Senior, please don't blame Junior for being straightforward. Junior can't see through your cultivation, but even if you've reached the 6th or 7th grade of elemental energy, you still wouldn't be a match for Duanmu family. Oh! Xiaohua was even more puzzled. If the family's power is so huge, then what about the scholarly sects? Like country Shi's Chongyun sect? How many classes are the families divided into? What are the first class? What are the second class? My lord! Xiao Jian, who was at the side, was completely dizzy. He stole a glance to the left and right. There weren't many people who came to Zhai Xinglu. At this moment, there were only a few carriages in this empty space. The youth in green was leading the way in front, so Xiao Jian lowered his voice and said, "Senior, you've really been cultivating overseas all this time. But even overseas, hidden immortal continents, 4 major families, Dongfang, Ximen, Nangong and Baiming, have existed since ancient times. How can you not know? Those so-called scholarly sects are merely clowns. How can they be compared to the profound heritage of scholarly families? However, Junior isn't a scholarly cultivator. My Dan Liang country was also a Dao sect in the past. Junior doesn't understand the specific situation of these scholarly families. I only know that these scholarly families are divided into 9 classes. Each class is divided into 2 levels, the first class and the second class. The 4 major families that Junior mentioned just now are the first class and the second class. Junior doesn't know which ones exactly. These scholarly families are the true masters of hidden immortal continent. Alas, now isn't the time to talk about it in detail. When there's time in the future, Junior will explain it in detail to Senior. Damn it, so that's how it is. Xiaohua bitterly smiled. He always thought that scholarly cultivators were similar to Dao sections. Those scholarly sects like Chongyun sect and Tianji sect were the same as the cultivation sects of Xiaoyu continent. They were the mainstream of hidden immortal continent's cultivation. But he didn't expect that this so-called scholarly families were the true behemoths. Sweeping a glance at Xiao Jian, who had a bitter expression on his face, Xiaohua knew that what he said was the common knowledge of hidden immortal continent. Everyone should know about it, especially cultivators like him. He also couldn't blame Xiao Jian for not reminding him. Anyone who saw that divine dragon horse and that golden carriage wouldn't know that this was the appearance of the peak character of hidden immortal continent. Those people couldn't wait to hide. Instead, he had a dispute with them. Moreover, looking at the appearance of that muscular man wearing golden armor, he didn't seem to be willing to let the matter go. It was really troublesome. Senior. Xiao Jian's previously upright face began to look shifty. He looked left and right and said in a low voice, Junior saw that this Duanmu Gongzi wasn't a broad-minded person. Just now, he was restrained by this Zhu Gongzi and couldn't get angry. But that Zhu Gongzi's meaning was obvious. Since it was Zhai Xinglu's guest, he wouldn't let Duanmu Gongzi take action. But if Zhai Xinglu left, he definitely wouldn't care. Junior saw that the coachman didn't drive the carriage in. Maybe he's doing something outside. Might as well take advantage of this opportunity. Although Xiao Jian didn't say the word slip, Xiaohua understood. Even Lu Yi's face showed the same expression. Hee. Xiaohua sneered. We came here on behalf of Dao sects. If we don't even enter Zhai Xinglu's door, wouldn't our Dao sect's reputation be thrown away by us? Dao sects? What reputation does Dao sects have? How come I don't know about it? Xiao Jian muttered, Dao Sect's reputation is worthless compared to brothel girls, right? What did you say? Xiao Hua frowned. When Xiao Jian heard this, he hurriedly laughed. Hee, nothing. Senior, Junior just felt that, compared to your previous cautiousness, is rather different. Is that so? How come this Xiao doesn't know? When you first came to River Tide Temple, you acted exactly like an ordinary person. Junior even thought that you were sent by someone else. Even when facing the bald donkeys from Shaojin Temple, you were still extremely humble. With your methods of dealing with bandits, you didn't even need to lift a finger. Even that pet beast of yours could completely exterminate the monks from Shaojin Temple. You even used an extremely ugly wooden club to scare them. Xiao Jian laughed. But what about today? Actually, you could have avoided that carriage and even that whip. Especially, even if you took the whip and didn't let go, and didn't throw the coachman off the carriage, wouldn't that have prevented all of this from happening in the future? Also, you actually rushed into the dragon horse and subdued the dragon horse in front of everyone. This isn't Senior's usual behavior of keeping a low profile. Hiss! Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. As a bystander, Xiao Jian saw everything clearly. What Xiao Jian said was the truth. If he had retreated half a step like before, he wouldn't have retreated. As long as he had reason and evidence, he wouldn't have offended this so-called first-rate Duanmu family's young master. However, he actually dragged the coachman off the carriage. He, a Jindan cultivator, actually had to lower himself to the same level as an aura-refining brute. However, the trajectory of this giant hand picking the stars is a little similar. It is even more powerful than the nascent soul hand of the Dao sect on the Dawn Rain continent. This Zhai Xing Lu is actually this powerful? Although the nascent soul hand is extremely powerful, that is because the nascent soul communicates with heaven and earth, uses the power of heaven and earth spirit qi. Compared to the abstract, indescribable principles or rules, yes, rules, this giant hand contains, it is far inferior. Just a screen from Zhai Xing Lu is already so imposing. No, that's not all. Just a screen from Zhai Xing Lu in the Copper Pillar country in Yu province is already so powerful. Then what kind of a monster is the so-called alliance? Oh, perhaps. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua was somewhat enlightened. The first-class Duanmu family actually gave such face to a scholar like Brother Zhu, to Zhai Xing Lu. Perhaps this Zhai Xing Lu is controlled by one of the four great families? Also, the light of the stars and moon is being grasped by this giant hand. This rule is so powerful that it seems to be able to absorb the power of the stars and moon. Although I can also absorb starlight from the extraterritorial domain, other than knowing that it can be used in alchemy, I know nothing else. This Zhai Xing Lu placing the screen here, what does it mean? Does it mean that they have the ability to use the power of starlight? Hee, Brother Zhu, look, this little Taoist has indeed entered Zhai Xing Lu. I knew it, he must be trying to use Zhai Xing Lu's power to hide. Only 3 of them came in, and the little fellow is not here. He must have gone elsewhere to gather information. In a rather luxurious room in Zhai Xing Lu, young Master Duanmu held a luminous goblet in his hand as he took a sip of the blood-red wine. Scholar Zhu was also holding a goblet of wine. He smiled as he looked at a bronze mirror in front of him. The bronze mirror reflected the scene in front of Zhai Xing Lu. Chapter 3256. Thank you for your auspicious words. Zhu Qing smiles, but immediately warns. That's right, today's auction is a bit strange. The items being auctioned are strange. Look carefully before you act. In particular, there are some people I can't see through who are participating in this auction. Don't join in the fun. Even I can't? Young Master Duanmu's face shows a strange expression. That's right, you can't. 'Cause I can't stop them from coming. Zhu Qing says word by word, then hurriedly leaves. Today is really strange. Looking at Zhu Qing's back, young Master Duanmu looks at the bronze mirror again. In front of the screen, Xiaohua has already left. I just came to Zhai Xinglu and met the little Taoist who dares to oppose the dragon horse. The auction hasn't even started yet. There's actually something that even young Master Duanmu can't join in on. What kind of world is this? Do they still want people to live? Xiaohua stands in front of the screen and watches the large hand merge the light of the moon and stars into it. The large hand then follows his divine sense and turns into two large words. Yes, in the end, Xiaohua already realized that everything on the screen moves according to his divine sense. Seeing the two large words, star and moon, appear on the screen and dissipate like stardust, Xiaohua seems to understand something. Star and Moon Alliance. This is the Star and Moon Alliance that Xiao Jian mentioned. Senior? Xiaohua's gaze has yet to move away from the screen when Xiao Jian's voice rings in his ear. Senior, have you made a decision? Do you want to leave now or wait for Brother Lu to find the back door? You keep standing here, I'm afraid it's not appropriate, right? Oh, Xiaohua comes to his senses and looks up. Indeed, not far from him, the green-clothed youths are looking at him with a smile that isn't a smile. They think that Xiaohua is delaying something. Taoist. It is at this moment that Lu Yi quietly sneaks over and says in a low voice, I've already found out that there's only one entrance to Zhai Xinglu. There are no exits anywhere else. In a while, when the auction is over, everyone will have to leave from here. Senior, let's go. There's no time to lose. Xiao Jian glanced behind him. There, for dragon horses had just pulled the golden carriage into the signboard. Under the guidance of two green-clothed youths, they were ready to stop in front of the door. You can go back first. Xiaohua said with a smile, since this old man is here, I will go and take a look. After saying that, Xiaohua flicked his sleeve and walked towards the side of the screen. All right. Xiao Jian said helplessly. Since Senior isn't leaving, then Junior won't leave either. Junior will go through thick and thin with Senior. There's no need. Xiaohua waved his hand. Offending the Duanmu family has nothing to do with you. None of you have any cultivation, so they won't bother with you. I hope so. Xiao Jian smiled bitterly. Senior, you don't know that those playboys love to vent their anger on others? Xiaohua's brows raised up and he said with a smile, Yeah, you understand this matter best. However, since this Duanmu family is a first-rate family, how could it possibly be so superficial? What could Xiao Jian say? He felt that although Xiaohua's strength was unfathomable, he might not be as familiar with the human heart as he was. However, he really didn't dare to leave Xiaohua's side. He didn't dare to take the risk and be killed by that golden-armored man. That fellow was even more powerful than Yuanya. This place is somewhat interesting. Xiao Jian's mind was filled with thoughts. However, when he turned around the screen and saw the situation in front of him, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He saw that this place was about 1 mu in size. It was several times bigger than what he had seen from the outside. If Taoist Elder takes it, not only can you rent a star palace and wait for other immortal elders to come to trade, you can also write what you want to find on the star token. The contents of the star token can be shown to the immortal elders of the other star palaces. In other words, Taoist Elder can stay in a star palace and know what the immortal elders of the other star palaces want to trade. This saves Taoist Elder the trouble of searching. It's so convenient. Xiaohua's eyes brighten. Then can this old man also know what is in other people's small Qiankuan bag? Of course. The woman pursed her lips and says with a smile, other than the things the immortal elders of the star palaces are not willing to show, everything else can be seen. How do we trade? Xiaohua's interest is piqued. How do two people in the star palaces trade? Taoist Elder will have to go by himself. The woman says apologetically, It's better for the immortal elders to trade with their own hands. If you give it to my Zhai Xing Lu, it will be traded at the auction later. Okay, this old man wants a silver star token. Xiaohua nods and says, this silver star token is really convenient and is really worth 10 low-grade primordial stones. The woman's face shows a smile. She points at the silver star token in Xiaohua's hand and says, Taoist Elder's Star Palace is at Hong 446. Taoist Elder can enter with this star token. Then she passes the small Qinquan bag in her hand to Xiaohua. Inside are the other 2 star tokens and the remaining gold. Taoist Elder, please count them. Hee hee. Xiaohua laughs and takes the small Qinquan bag. Miss is really smart. How did you know this old man would definitely want this silver star token? More than 90 low-grade primordial stones and 10 low-grade primordial stones for convenience. Anyone who hears this will be moved. Don't you think so? The woman doesn't hide it and says with a smile, just now, this servant left in a hurry and didn't have time to tell you. Now that this servant has said it, won't Taoist Elder understand? Xiaohua laughs loudly. That's right, back in the Xiaoyu continent, 1 mid-grade primordial stone could only be exchanged for 10 low-grade primordial stones. Now, he can exchange for 100 in one go. Taking out 10 for convenience, Xiaohua can really accept it. He doesn't even have the interest to count the remaining gold. With a wave of his hand, he wants to put the small Qinquan bag away. This time, the woman is very anxious and says embarrassedly, Taoist Elder, this small Qinquan bag is my Zhai Xing Lu's public use. It doesn't belong to this servant. Taoist Elder, please take away the things inside and return the small Qinquan bag to this servant. Hee hee, this old man is used to taking it. Xiaohua smiles embarrassedly and puts the things inside his space. He passes the small Qinquan bag to the woman and says with a smile, how many primordial stones is this small Qinquan bag? How about this old man give you primordial stones? The woman takes the small Qinquan bag and says with a smile, my Zhai Xing Lu also has things for sale in the Star Palace. The small Qinquan bag and other items should be inside. It's in Sky number 1. If Taoist Elder is interested, you can go take a look. In addition, the location of each Star Palace and even the Star Palace that Taoist Elder rents are all in this star token. Taoist Elder can use Taoist's divine sense to check it. Xiaohua raises his eyebrows and says curiously, could it be that the star tokens of Taoist, Confucian, and Buddhist are different? It's the same. The woman replies, this star token can be inspected by divine sense, Buddhist awareness, eye-clearing technique, and even primordial thoughts. See. Xiaohua is slightly shocked. He didn't expect this star token to be so powerful. Xiaohua passes the other 3 bronze star tokens to Xiao Jian and the other 2. However, he suddenly thinks of something and hurriedly asks, that's right, can this star token hide one's appearance? Of course it can. The woman says proudly, as long as you trade in my Zhai Xing Lu, this star token can attract starlight and hide Taoist Elder's appearance. No matter what Taoist Elder trades, it will be impossible for others to know. Good, Xiaohua claps his hands. While praising in his heart, he becomes even more curious about the Star-Moon Alliance. The auction on the Dawn Rain continent doesn't seem to be done so well. The woman keeps the small Qinquan bag and places her hands on her waist. She says with a smile, this servant wishes Taoist Elders a smooth trade in my Zhai Xing Lu and a successful one. After saying that, the woman leaves very obediently and doesn't stay for a moment longer. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you can take a look around yourself. Xiaohua looks at the star path under his feet and then looks at the stars one by one. He says, if there's anything you like, you can come to Hong 46's Star Palace to find this Xiao. But Lu Yi stares blankly at the side and says in a low voice, Taoist Elder, where is Hong 46? These stars don't look any different. Wait a moment. Xiaohua takes the silver star token and infuses it with his divine sense. Sure enough, inside the star token is a star chart similar to the Star Palace in this space. Heaven 1, Earth 2, Mystic 3, Yellow 4 are all marked. And not far away, The one with the special word is Hong 46. Xiaohua doesn't know how to explain it to Louis. He passes the star token to Xiao Jian and says, "Take a look for yourself and come find this Xiao in a while." Xiao Jian takes the star token and infuses it with his divine sense. After a while, he withdraws his divine sense with a shocked expression on his face. Although he was once the ruler of a country, he has never seen such a scene before. Xiaohua takes the star token from Xiao Jian, looks at Xiao Jian with interest and asks, "Did you see it clearly?" "Junior understands." Xiao Jian says respectfully, "If Junior needs anything, I will definitely find Senior." "All right." Xiaohua waves his hand, turns around and walks towards Hong 46 with large strides. As he walks, he says, "This Xiao also wishes you to find what you want." That's right, Xiao Jian only had his spiritual force but no cultivation. Although Xiaohua didn't investigate his situation, it was obvious that Xiao Jian's cultivation had been crippled. Xiao Jian probably came to Bright Moon Lane in Bronze Pillar State to find a way to restore his cultivation. However, Xiaohua really doesn't understand. Since he already has primeval stones, he might be able to find a spirit pill similar to the heavenly pill in this auction. Why was Xiao Jian able to lose all of his primeval stones in one night? Xiaohua didn't use any flying talisman, but as he takes large strides, thousands of stars flashed from afar and gathered under his feet, like stars surrounding the moon, sending him forward. Xiaohua was a Jindan stage cultivator who had flown in the sky and experienced the heavenly Dao starry sky. Walking on this kind of star chart, he felt relaxed and happy. How could Yuan Ya and Lu Yi, who had never cultivated before, be fascinated by it? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.